Chapter 101, Empress Candidates, I. At a military camp on the outskirts of Paris, Artorius's corps members were gathered for a meeting to discuss a marriage proposal concerning King Theodoric of the Ostrogothic kingdom. Regarding this matter, most of the generals expressed cautious support. In Gawain's words, "Your Majesty isn't getting any younger, it's time to secure a good marriage. We need a good heir to ensure the prosperity of our Britain. I mean, Roman Empire, for generations to come," said Gaheris. He almost slipped up in mentioning the rapid rise of Britain. However, since he was Artorius's relative, everyone overlooked this minor slip. "Yeah, that's right. No doubt about it." Several people expressed their agreement. "Our current plan is still to unify all of Gaul," said Agravain, a candidate for the future Chancellor and Marshal of the Empire. "After conquering all of Gaul and integrating Central Europe, the Empire should take a period of rest and recuperation, accumulating strength. In such circumstances, having a friendly regime controlling Italy seems like a good choice. This marriage will also provide us with a pretext to get involved with the Ostrogoths. By that time, we could smoothly incorporate the entire Italy, Dalmatia, and Pannonia into the Empire's territory without shedding a drop of blood. Theodoric is already in his 40s and still lacks a male heir. So when he passes away..." Agravain spoke with a focus on practical benefits, voicing a somewhat gloomy idea. The Knights of the Round Table didn't know how to respond to such remarks until Agravain added, "It's also for the well-being of the people. Isn't it great to unify Europe without war?" "That's right. No doubt about it. I didn't expect you to have such insight. You've been well taught by His Majesty." The newly promoted Knights of the Round Table, now elevated to the status of imperial ministers or high-rank officials, all nodded in agreement. It seemed like everyone was in favor of the alliance with the Ostrogoths. As for the Germanic and Roman vassal nobles, they had no say in this matter. Each one of them stood there with an embarrassed yet polite smile, refraining from speaking. Was everyone in favor of the alliance with the Ostrogoths? Basically, yes. But were there any dissenting voices? Of course, there were. "I refuse. His Majesty must not marry that woman." It was Morgan who spoke up. "That's right. She got a point." Mordred chimed in from behind her. Artorius. Artoria, sitting on the other side, didn't say anything. She only looked at Artorius and muttered his name with a worried expression. Because of her identity, she couldn't easily speak on this topic. Of course, if one were to ask her whether she supported it or not, she would certainly be against it. "So, Lady Morgan?" Agravain inquired, "what is your reason for opposing?" "Of course, it's because I want to be the Empress myself." Morgan said this in her mind, she couldn't really say it out loud. But, caught off guard by Agravain's question, she hesitated for a moment before weakly emphasizing, that, anyway, it's just not right. Listening to her words, Artorius had a helpless expression, while Agravain looked at her with cold indifference. During these past few days, aside from marching, engaging in battles, and helping in the field of magecraft, Morgan also caused constant trouble for her own benefit. Within the Knights of the Round Table, she declared that she created her children instead of conceiving them naturally. She also explained to them that Artorius was a Pendragon in concept rather than bloodline. She aimed to properly pave her way to the throne as Empress and gain public acceptance. By declaring that she created her children, she distanced herself from any maternal connections with her children in the Knights of the Round Table. The notion of being related by concept rather than bloodline also clarified that her relationship with Artorius was merely that of a nominal nephew and aunt. Since they had no blood ties, they weren't considered kin, which meant she could legally become his empress. However, this approach proved to be a double-edged sword. The theory of concept over bloodline was relatively acceptable, but the idea of creation instead of birth only intensified her children's dislike for her. Especially Agravain, who always felt that Morgan was dangerous, too dark, morally unfit, and not suitable to be the empress. This infuriated her but left her powerless. In fact, discussions about Artorius's life matter had already taken place before the arrival of Theodoric's envoy with the proposal of marriage. An emperor must have an empress. So who should be the candidate for empress? Morgan was the most obvious and proactive. She stayed by Artorius's side whenever she had the chance, engaging in various flirtatious actions. Night after night, she endeavored to outdo others in terms of time and frequency. As for Artorius, he didn't reject or deny Morgan's advances, partly to appease her, and of course, partly to satisfy his own lusts. This further deluded Morgan into thinking that the throne of the Empress was already within her grasp. A pity, that was not the case. Even if they exclude the sudden marriage proposal of the Ostrogothic princess, the most suitable Empress candidate chosen within the Knights of the Round Table was not Morgan. So, who would be the best match for His Majesty? For such a great emperor, what kind of empress would be worthy of the title in the realm of Europe? This was no trivial matter. It was no longer like in the past when they were in Britain, where they could pick any noble or princess-like figure. But now was different. The empire had expanded tenfold. And it would continue to grow. Artorius had expanded a small territory like Camelot to become a colossal entity spanning across Europe. For such a magnificent empire, the selection of an empress had to be carefully considered. Privately, the Knights of the Round Table discussed that Morgan was not suitable. Then, who among them, being most beloved by Artorius and a member of the Knights of the Round Table, would be the right choice? Mordred, perhaps? Some of the Knights of the Round Table thought Gareth would be a better choice, but she couldn't compare to Mordred in Artorius's eyes. If they wanted to maintain and consolidate the authority of the Knights of the Round Table, the union of Artorius and Mordred seemed to be the best option. The Romans and Germanic peoples also desired an empress to represent their interests. However, as newcomers under the new emerging regime of Britain, they didn't have as much influence as the Knights of the Round Table. Artorius wasn't particularly interested in marrying a Roman or Germanic princess at the moment. At best, he might choose a few women as concubines to reassure them. Unless there was a second woman in this world who could match Mordred in terms of bloodline, status, ability, and emotions. But was there such a person? Was there such a character? Absolutely not, right? The House of Pendragon had only two suitable women, Morgan Le Fay and Mordred. There couldn't possibly be a sudden emergence of a third one. Author's note. In real history, Theodoric didn't ascend to the throne until the year 493. Now it's 486, so technically, he is still a prince. Let's consider this an alternate history of type Moon. Just to clarify, Pannonia, which includes modern-day Hungary, Romania, Serbia, Croatia, Slovakia, and Austria, was indeed within the sphere of influence of the Ostrogoths during that time. Chapter 102, Empress Candidates, 2. Regarding the Ostrogothic alliance and Artorius's marriage, everyone discussed it back and forth, but in the end, they couldn't come up with a clear conclusion, so they dispersed with laughter. In any case, they were in an advantageous position now. Wherever the great army went, Roman cities surrendered without a fight. After the collapse of the last two legions of Sirius, there was no longer any legion belonging to the Western Empire in all of Gaul. Artorius's great army received news of city after city, tribe after tribe, and village after village surrendering every day. Not to mention entire legions, even a scout team consisting of just a dozen people could conquer a city. At this rate, it wouldn't be long before the British-Roman forces could conquer all of Gaul. In contrast, the Ostrogothic kingdom held Pannonia. Although the land was decent, it was still relatively small, with limited resources. The Ostrogoths had not yet entered Italy and hadn't gained much advantage in their wars against the Western Roman Empire. Comparatively, Artorius's British-Roman forces were much stronger than the Ostrogoths. When the Knights of the Round Table discussed matters concerning the Ostrogoths, they did so with a relaxed attitude. Especially Artorius himself, his stance was ambiguous and undecided. He wasn't a puppet like other emperors who got pushed around by the Senate, nor was he a poor creature overshadowed by the Praetorian Guard. Artorius had built his empire with his own hands from zero. He was an emperor elected by the people, and as long as he didn't wish it, no one could control him. So, in the end, the Ostrogoths' envoy came with enthusiasm but left in disappointment. He did manage to secure an alliance agreement with Artorius but failed to reach a marriage proposal, and he couldn't even meet Artorius again before leaving. Instead, he was dismissed by a middle-aged man with a gloomy complexion and a significantly receding hairline, whom Artorius supposedly trusted as his most valued official. The man said with an air of dominance that was hard not to roll one's eyes at his words, "The emperor doesn't want to get married, they can wait." After the envoy returned to the Ostrogoths, a somewhat disappointed Theodoric made a comment, "That guy is probably the second most powerful figure in the empire, right after the emperor." "That's right, they say he'll become the empire's chancellor in the future, second only to the emperor himself." The envoy added fuel to the fire to cover up his own failures, making Agravain sound like a balding version of Charles from the Merovingian dynasty. Of course, that wasn't entirely true, since many British and Romans also despised Agravain openly. One of those who despised him was a woman currently straddling Artorius and shaking her hips fiercely. Damn him! One day, I'll kill his whole family. Hey, doesn't that mean you want to kill yourself? Artorius reminded Morgan and gave her plump behind a playful pat, earning a seductive eye roll from Morgan in return. There's something else. Morgan fell silent for a moment, putting in some extra effort to squeeze his majestic spear which made the bed creak and squeak. So this time, Artorius took over the conversation. Even if Agravain doesn't object for you to become the Empress, the other knights of the Round Table won't support it. Your reputation is just that bad. Ha! Ah! It took Morgan 20 minutes to respond to Artorius's words. Her voice now sounded languid, as if she could fall asleep at any moment. Huffed, if they don't support it, then it doesn't matter, as long as you do, it's fine, after all, you're the Emperor. I may be the Emperor, but I also have to consider public opinion. Artorius replied casually, caressing her smooth back and enjoying the warm squeeze on his spear which was inside the beautiful woman's cave in his arms. You jerk! Can't you side with me just once? Curse the public opinion. All of them should just burn. Coming. Morgan said with frustration but was interrupted by a moment of ecstasy. Ha, you, jerk. Although she appeared to resent Artorius during their conversation, her body betrayed her true feelings as she couldn't help but move her hips as fast as she could to squeeze his cream as much as possible. Ha, before, you said you would give Britain to me and make me a queen, but you didn't. After that, you said you'd compensate me, and now this. You're just using me, like a tool. Upon saying this, Morgan could no longer hold on and fell into a deep sleep. Despite her apparent resentment towards Artorius during their conversation, Morgan, now lying in his embrace, displayed a relieved expression. How could you say that? Although Morgan could no longer hear him, Artorius responded to her nonetheless. This empire is just the beginning. It's only one step towards achieving our ultimate goal. The title of Empress is just a temporary, a mere fancy title. In the future, we'll be together for a long time, 1,000 years, 10,000 years, 100,000, or maybe a million. So long that you might even get tired of it. Why should we argue over short-term gains and losses? It's meaningless. Because the 1,000, 10,000, those are all in the future. Suddenly, not far from Artorius, a leisurely voice responded to his words. It was Scathatch, dressed regally like a queen and beautiful as always. In the next second, Artorius left Morgan's embrace and teleported a short distance in front of Scathatch. His once naked, flawless body now adorned a beautiful robe. Can't sleep, teacher. She didn't answer Artorius's question but instead replied, I heard things are getting a bit messy with this Empress thingy. Just some minor issues. Artorius casually remarked, just family matters, nothing worth mentioning. Really? She snorted lightly, that's not what Mordred said. She went to find you. Not at all. Scathatch shifted slightly, her alluring figure accentuated by the tight leather armor. She was muttering to herself during training, I am my brother's bride, I should have been first, I'm the woman he loves the most. You know, those kinds of things. Even if I wanted to pretend not to hear, I couldn't. That kid. Artorius couldn't help but sigh and face palm. So, what do you really mean? Scathatch continued to inquire. Whom do you want to choose? Representing the Knights of the Round Table, there's Mordred, and representing the right of succession in alliance, there's the Ostrogothic princess. You won't tell me it's Morgan Le Fay, right? Artorius fell silent. Teacher, you seem quite invested in this matter. He said, trying to find any flaws in Scathach's behavior. But Scathatch was, after all, Scathatch. She snorted lightly, effortlessly providing an explanation without revealing any weaknesses. Just feeling regretful, that's all, after all, I've contributed to this country as well. If it were to collapse over such trivial matters, my efforts would be in vain. Author's note. Regarding Artoria and Artorius, they're more like siblings than mother and son. Artorius shares the same dragon factor and dragon heart as Artoria and was born a few years later but was raised by Artoria as her son to hide his true origin. Chapter 103, A Woman Who Lacks Love. A bonus chapter for every 1k power stones, thanks for the support. But Scat Hatch was, after all, Scat Hatch. She snorted lightly, effortlessly providing an explanation without revealing any weaknesses. Just feeling regretful, that's all. After all, I've contributed to this country as well. If it were to collapse over such trivial matters, my efforts would be in vain. Is that so? On the surface, Artorius appeared deep in thought, but inwardly, he couldn't help but chuckle. Scat Hatch said, I'm worried about the country collapsing, so I care about your marriage, kid. At first glance, it seemed to make some sense, but upon closer analysis, it was utter nonsense. Artorius's empire wouldn't simply crumble like that. He had fate, strength, and prestige that surpassed everything else. As the founding monarch, he had the power to suppress any dissenting or rebellious voices. His realm was built with his own hands. Under these circumstances, the idea of the country collapsing due to the issue of the Empress's selection was ridiculous. Scat Hatch was a very clever individual. Her abilities were of magical wisdom, not magical foolishness. There was no way she couldn't see through it. So, there was only one truth. Scat Hatch was looking for an excuse. And a very poor one at that. If Scat Hatch had really put some thought into it, she could have come up with a much better excuse, one that even Artorius wouldn't find fault with or detect any loopholes. But she chose to give this feeble excuse. What did that mean? It meant that Scat Hatch intentionally wanted Artorius to see through it. She wanted to convey her point of view. I see. So that's how it is. Artorius thought, a delighted smile creeping up on his lips. Not surprising at all, it's teacher Scat Hatch after all. She's got quite the moves. Good thing I'm not too shabby myself. Having reached this understanding, Artorius could draw his conclusion. Why did Scat Hatch behave this way? There was only one truth behind it all. She likes me, hey. Thinking this, Artorius's mood brightened. I am truly outstanding. Even a beauty like Scat Hatch couldn't resist my charm. At the same time, Scat Hatch noticed Artorius's expression had become somewhat strange, the kind that made her want to punch him in the face. So, what now? Irritated by this change, Scat Hatch asked Artorius, be more specific. What are you planning to do? Of course, I'll appease them. Artorius replied nonchalantly, addressing Scat Hatch, I'll tell them, whether it's Morgan, Mordred, or any other women I love, it has nothing to do with my status as the Emperor or this Empress's candidates thingy. My love for them is just because I love them. That's it. Humph. Hearing Artorius's answer, Scat Hatch fell silent for a few minutes before grumbling, whatever, I'm not that concerned about this. What about the heir issue then? You don't really want to be the Emperor of a 1,000-year empire, do you? Why not? Scat Hatch raised an eyebrow at Artorius's response. But before she could say anything sarcastic, Artorius's next words dispelled her doubts. Teacher, as a divine spirit, you can freely move in the surface world without true ether. Why is that? Of course, it's because well, that's indeed one way to do it. With just a slight hint from Artorius, Scat Hatch understood what he meant. Standing here and conversing with him was not Scathika's real body but a puppet body she had created. It was exquisitely crafted, using the finest materials. It even had some kind of ascension module installed due to Scathika's own peculiar taste, capable of carrying her strong soul, thereby avoiding the issues of being unable to adapt to the environment after the decline of the Age of Gods. As for what Scat Hatch had just understood, it naturally pertained to the issue of Artorius's heir that she had just mentioned. He planned to create puppets, pretending they were his children, and manipulate them to ensure the succession of the royal family. In this way, on the surface, the House of Pendragon would appear like any ordinary mortal dynasty, constantly changing, but in reality, it would merely involve replacing one puppet's body with another. Artorius Pendragon would remain the puppeteer in control of everything. Look at him, acting so confident. Did he already plan to do this? What a crafty fellow. Thinking this, Scat Hatch felt somewhat bored. Since you have a plan, I won't say much more. Saying this, she stood up, ready to leave. Teacher. But before she could do so, Artorius called her back. Anything else? Please continue to help me in the future. Artorius said. I still need your guidance and assistance. Humph, that goes without saying. Scat Hatch snorted. I'll keep an eye on you until the end. That might disappoint you, my dear teacher. Artorius smiled. Me and my empire will know no end. And that's how Artorius passed Scathicus' ordeal. He turned around and got back into bed, snuggling up to Morgan's soft body, finding the most comfortable position, and then closing his eyes again. I still need you, Morgan. He whispered in Morgan's ear, saying gently. You're a foolish woman, lacking love and security. Of course, I love you. But this time, I can't give you the throne of the Empress. I also know that what you truly desire isn't the Empress's throne, power, status, or anything else. What you want is love, someone, who cares for you, likes you, won't look at you with disdain, accepts your dark side, accepts your everything. All your actions, the arguments, the struggles, or whatever it may be, are merely your way of worrying, testing, and probing my love for you. Foolish woman. At that moment, the pretending to be asleep Morgan exclaimed Kaie. As Artorius pressed her down directly. Why you? I'm almost laughing. Artorius looked at her with an assertive gaze. You're not very smart, emotionally, I mean. It's okay to maintain the evil witch facade in front of others. In front of me, it's better if you're more straightforward and just be yourself, Morgan. Did you hear what I just said earlier? Artorius didn't give her a chance to speak. I heard. Will you be obedient from now on? Confronted by the imposing and oppressive dragon, feeling hot and dry-mouthed, Morgan hesitated for a moment and then gave herself away. I will. I'll be obedient. Good. The gasp soon turned into pleasure. Morgan Le Fay, who almost wanted to melt into Artorius entirely, was completely lost in the moment. Chapter 104, Growing. The selection of the Empress went very smoothly. Although Scathatch complained that Mordred was full of grievances, Artorius simply pacified her, and Mordred happily agreed to listen to her brother and didn't mind too much. Compared to Mordred, Morgan was a bit more troublesome. But as long as she couldn't get up in the morning, she would be obedient and well-behaved. As Artorius said, her bitterness and desire for revenge were just her defense mechanisms. Once Artorius peeled off this layer of armor, Morgan's soft and vulnerable side was revealed. In the presence of a powerful man like Artorius, who could completely control her, Morgan's behavior was no better than Mordred's. Although she still grumbled during the day, saying things like "Why can't I be the Empress?" while on the night shouted "Today, I will be on the top." It was all seen through. She was just all talk. After Artorius managed to handle the strong contenders for the Empress's position, except for the persistent Agravain, who was still begging Artorius to cooperate a little in important matters, the other knights of the Round Table didn't want to waste more words on this topic. With the ongoing event, wouldn't it be better to focus more on governance and military affairs? Artorius's plan was to conquer the whole of Gaul before Christmas, and time was running out. Under Artorius's urging, the entire British Roman worked tirelessly like a well-oiled machine. In this situation, there shouldn't be anyone wasting time on irrelevant matters. Everything was under the control of His Majesty the Emperor. It should have been that way, but the time was early December. In the southern Gaul city of Bordeaux, Artorius's army easily captured the city. The city's inhabitants couldn't wait to open the gates and welcome their emperor. As for the Roman officers who remained loyal to Lucius, they ultimately didn't receive the expected reinforcements. The nearest Roman legion to them was trembling at the pass of the Pyrenees Mountains. The governor of Tarraconensis province insisted that they should defend Spain and not take any offensive actions. With the fall of Bordeaux, the Aquitania province to the southwest of Gaul also came under Artorius's control, becoming part of the British Roman. At the same time, Lancelot led another division and reported good news from their southern campaign towards Lugdunum. They captured the town, which would be later renamed Lyon in the future. The retreating troops scattered towards Italy. With this, all of Gaul mainly was pacified. Artorius could now declare himself the emperor of all Gaul. In the future, the three most important countries that would shape European civilization, France, Germany, and England, were all under Artorius's control. It was a day worth celebrating, and the weather was gradually getting colder. Artorius's half-million-strong army was feeling fatigued. He decided to rest and regroup until the next spring, settling the several 100,000 Germanic peoples, allowing his army to recover and rest, and then launch an attack on southern Europe. Things can ease up a bit now. Thinking this, Artorius, occupying the best room in the governor's mansion in Bordeaux, soaked in a bathtub, enjoying a hot bath while pondering tonight's little problem. Morgan or Mordred? Yesterday was Morgan, so logically it should be Mordred's turn today. But Morgan isn't one to follow logic. How about both of them together? Artorius pondered the question, allowing his mind to wander a bit. Perhaps it was the effect of the hot water, but for a moment, his thoughts seemed to shift from the top of his head to somewhere below. With the third magic in his possession, Artorius was no longer afraid of running out of magical energy. In terms of magical energy, he was like a perpetual motion machine, and in matters of sex, he was equally like a perpetual motion machine, tireless and unstoppable. Not just with Morgan and Mordred, he could handle a few hundred more without a problem. With this in mind, Artorius began to formulate a serious plan. First, I need to exhaust one of them completely. Next, she'll ask for mercy, and then I'll need to express my dissatisfaction and figure out how to vent my surplus energy. Afterward, I should ask her if I should continue until she's completely exhausted or if I should call another woman to help. The probability of her choosing the latter is quite high. But I can't choose Morgan as my first target, that woman is too stubborn and narrow-minded. Even if I wear her out until she makes an AJO face, she won't let anyone take advantage and steal her position. So, let's start with little Mo. That way, Morgan will think that she has taken advantage of little Mo's exhausted condition and will be very pleased by taking little Mo's position as my partner. With enough repetitions, they won't resist anymore, and we could even do a threesome right off the bat without doing these complicated steps every time. Yet, what a genius plan! And so, Artorius planned everything, setting Morgan and Mordred perfectly to do a threesome later. Then, he closed his eyes and prepared to take a short nap. These days, he had been engaged in intense battles and handling affairs of state, and though his body could handle it, his mind was starting to feel a bit tired. However, just at that moment, a knocking sound came from the door. "Who is it?" Artorius asked lazily. A moment later, he heard the hesitant voice of his mother. It's me, Artorius." Upon hearing this voice, Artorius hesitated momentarily and then disappeared from where he stood, appearing outside the bathroom with a bathrobe on. "Father." He opened the door and looked at Artoria, who was pursing her lips, feeling somewhat puzzled. "Aren't you resting yet, Father?" I have something I want to talk to you about," Artoria said with some difficulty. "Okay, come in and talk." Artorius nodded and let her in, closing the door. The wine in the cabinet floated out automatically and filled the glass in front of Artoria. "I don't, thank you." She initially wanted to decline, but before the refusal could leave her lips, the wine was already poured, so Artoria changed her mind and thanked him instead. She then took a sip. Her drinking and eating prowess seemed similar, she finished the glass in one go. As expected of Artoria. And so, Artorius poured her another glass. 3 times in a row, Artoria's face turned a cute shade of pink, and her gaze became somewhat hazy, making her look even more adorable than usual. Is it just my imagination? Artorius wondered. Father seems to have grown a size bigger than before. Shit, I forgot. And then it struck him like a revelation. Since he now possessed Avalon and Excalibur, the person whose body stopped growing was himself, not Artoria. Her body, which was once kept constant, began to grow again. Thinking about some other timelines where Artoria had fully grown, Artorius felt excited. This was precisely the topic that Artoria wanted to discuss with him. Chapter 105, Puberty. Artorius wore a cheerful smile while admiring the transformation of the 15-year-old girl into a mature beauty who was probably around 16 or 17 years old at the moment. At the same time, Artoria, driven by her subconscious desire for more alcohol, reached for the bottle herself before he could pour her another drink. However, Artorius stopped her, saying, "All right, Father, no more drinking." He persuaded Artoria, who reluctantly listened. Even though she initially wanted to drink more, she eventually let go, appearing somewhat dejected. "What's bothering you, Father?" asked Artorius. Well." After hesitating for a moment, Artoria finally spoke. Under the influence of alcohol, she had become a little bolder. Otherwise, she might have run away by now. "My body has been feeling a bit strange lately." She looked at Artorius and continued, "I've grown taller, and my chest and hips feel weird, very uncomfortable. It's like my body doesn't feel like mine anymore. But when I went for a checkup, both the doctors and mages said I was perfectly healthy, with no issues at all. It makes me feel uneasy." Artoria's tone conveyed her fear. Artorius knew that it was because she lacked sufficient knowledge about physiology or just didn't think about it at the moment. "It seems like you're going through puberty." Artorius didn't hide the truth and directly shared his speculation with Artoria, making her even more anxious. "So, you mean I'll grow to have a figure like Morgan's in the future? If everything goes well, I suppose that might happen." Artorius nodded. Silence followed Artoria's question, and she seemed visibly disappointed. "If that happens, I won't be able to stay by Artorius's side anymore," she murmured with this logic in mind. Artoria was currently known as Arthur Pendragon and was male. If her body continued to maintain its appearance at 15, undeveloped, she would still resemble a beautiful youth. Dressed in male attire, one could hardly tell the difference between her as the world's second most attractive youth after Artorius. However, now that she lacked Excalibur and Avalon, she couldn't maintain this appearance. Thus, her true gender would be revealed. Despite Artorius having established significant prestige, for a newly formed country, this could be a considerable shock and potentially a trouble. Artoria didn't want to hold Artorius back. Though she felt reluctant, she steeled herself and prepared to leave him to avoid causing any trouble. "She's much better than Morgan, she really cares for people." Artorius understood her thought, letting out a sigh. Then, he found it amusing. "Are you troubled because of this?" "Actually, there's no need to worry too much. This matter can be resolved," Artorius said with a smile. "Can be resolved? Is that true?" Upon hearing Artorius say this, Artoria became instantly happy. However, her joy didn't last long. "Artorius, are you going to give me Excalibur or Avalon back?" "No, you can't." She thought of a possibility. "You are the Emperor of the Empire, Excalibur is the symbol of a ruler and Avalon is the key to your safety. They must not be given to anyone." She appeared serious and sincere, as if ready to firmly reject any suggestion from Artorius. "That is one option." Artorius smiled, "But don't worry too much, father. Let me explain the plan first." "All right." Artoria calmed down and listened as Artorius laid out his plan. Afterward, she seemed both happy and puzzled, saying, "This sounds like a good idea, but can it really work?" "Of course." Artorius confidently replied, "This plan is feasible. But, it will require some effort on your part, father." "That's not a problem at all." Artoria decisively spoke, "As long as I can continue to stay by your side, a little trouble is nothing." After hearing her say that, Artorius was silent for a few seconds, looking at Artoria seriously. He confirmed that she wasn't confessing her feelings or saying something with hidden meaning, she was merely expressing her honest opinion. Only then did he breathe a sigh of relief, while also blaming Morgan in his mind. That woman was clearly a lousy degenerate, always had a sharp tongue and said whatever she wanted. Even after being reprimanded, she never learned her lesson. Always saying nonsense to everything, making Artorius view everything with a biased eye. So, the next day arrived. At 3 in the morning, a refreshed Artorius was diligently working in his office. With an infinite supply of magical energy, he no longer needed the inefficient method of resting to recover his spirit. He could work tirelessly and concentrate on multiple tasks at once. Using magecraft to manipulate his quill, he flawlessly reviewed more than 20 documents. He even managed to find a moment to indulge Morgan or Mordred under his desk, all while efficiently attending to official matters. However, though he could manage this, the same couldn't be said for the Imperial Chancellor. "Come in." After Artorius called out, Agravain, who had been officially appointed as the Imperial Chancellor, entered. Just by looking at his ethereal appearance, one could tell how well his spirit was. The Empire now controlled all of Gaul and the majority of Germania. Their military strength was already formidable enough, and it was time to focus on civil management. Receiving those cities, managing the treasury, restoring production in rural areas and farmlands, settling the hundreds of thousands of Germanic peoples, constructing new villages and towns, developing fields, laying roads, and building bridges. There were countless tasks. While Artorius could simultaneously handle 20 documents, the specific executions and actions required someone to organize them. Furthermore, Artorius intended to reform the government, transforming the originally crude and rudimentary Roman administrative system into a modern civil service government. He also wanted to promote new laws, new tax systems, advanced farming techniques, animal husbandry, fishing techniques, new engineering, blacksmithing, and water management facilities, all of which constituted a massive project. The only civil officials among the Knights of the Round Table were Agravain and Bedivere. If they didn't take on these responsibilities, who else could? Fortunately, the infinite magical energy had its benefits, not only extending Artorius's life but also prolonging the lives of his subordinates. Agravain and Bedivere still had a long way to go, they wouldn't retire until they were at least 80 years old. But that wasn't the topic of discussion now. It was something else entirely. King Arthur. Why are you wearing Mordred's clothes and using women's belongings? Agravain exclaimed when looked at Artoria beside Artorius, completely dumbfounded. Author's note. Just in case anyone is wondering why Artoria wasn't surprised when Artorius looked calm and also knew her true gender, it's because when she revealed the origin and truth of his birth, she also disclosed her own. Chapter 106, Artoria Pendragon. Standing by Artorius's side, like a graceful and elegant young lady, was Artoria Pendragon. She was currently dressed in a pristine white gown, adorned with a string of pearl necklaces, presenting herself with poise and beauty. The gown originally belonged to Mordred, and during a previous ball, she had danced twice with Artorius while resolutely turning down all other invitations. But that was all in the past. Mordred much preferred more practical attire, like armor or simple, easy-to-move-in clothes. She even liked sporty shorts. So, after that ball, the gown had been left to gather dust. One must admit that Agravain had an excellent memory. He remembered even the outfits Mordred had only worn once. This is. Seeing the former king dressed in such feminine attire, Agravain's mind descended into chaos and murmured, "A father and son. No wonder His Majesty doesn't want to marry. Is he interested in his own father, or interested in the same sex?" But, that. Not knowing what Agravain was murmuring, Artoria felt a bit shy and lowered her head. Meanwhile, Artorius, who had clearly heard the murmurs, suddenly felt the urge to give Agravain a good beating. Despite this, he managed to control his urge and instead, smiled pleasantly as he casually introduced Artoria to Agravain. "You've got it wrong, Sir Agravain. She is not my father." "She? Not?" Agravain fell silent for a few seconds. "Then, is she Mordred?" His expression was quite peculiar. "No, definitely not Mordred. Their auras are completely different." Despite having been educated in various ways by his big brother for a long time, Mordred still lacked much femininity and remained a bit of a tomboyish fool. On the other hand, the girl standing by Artorius now exuded a gentle aura, much like a lily flower. There was no way Agravain could mistake her gender. "Stop guessing." Artorius smiled. "This is Artoria Pendragon. She's a recent talent who came to join the Empire. But she just looks too much like King Arthur." Agravain couldn't help but think that. That appearance was practically identical to the former king's. "It's Morgan." Artorius's expression turned serious. "Artoria Pendragon is also Morgan's child, just like Mordred. She just hadn't met with us until recently." "I see." After learning that she was Morgan's, Agravain seemed to understand suddenly and didn't find it strange. On the contrary, it all made sense. Watching this reaction, Artorius couldn't help but continue his thoughts. Why is Morgan so good at picking up people's hatred? This Pendragon family is so messed up. On the surface, Artorius maintained a calm demeanor. "Artoria Pendragon is a good kid, and I'm satisfied with her capabilities. Let her stay by my side from now on." "Yes." Upon hearing Artorius's decision, Agravain hesitated to speak. He had a feeling that His Majesty had an unusual interest in women from the Pendragon. It was true for Morgan, it was true for Mordred, and it seemed to be the same for this newly emerged Artoria Pendragon. "Now, let's discuss state affairs, Sir Agravain." Next was the time to deal with official business. Before breakfast, Agravain delved into a series of imperial issues and government affairs with Artorius. With insights spanning thousands of years and a modern bureaucratic government that required a considerable number of competent officials, Agravain felt both fascinated and uneasy. Even if the Empire promoted education and knowledge, it would be challenging to quickly gather enough qualified talents. Moreover, how could they ensure the loyalty, diligence, integrity, and efficiency of these officials in a short time? All things were filled with uncertainty, and even Agravain found it incredibly challenging. Until Artorius spoke these words. "Sir Agravain, Just look at Artoria and you will find the answer. Artoria, does she perhaps possess administrative talent? No, your majesty didn't mean that. Could it be? Yes. Artorius said, a smirk forming on his lips as he observed Agravain's surprised expression. Concerning this matter, Lady Morgan might be able to be of assistance. Perhaps so, your majesty. Artorius's meaning was clear. He wanted Morgan to provide the necessary technology to mass-produce exceptionally skilled, loyal, and diligent homunculus, forming an imperial bureaucratic system. It was indeed a viable approach. With this method, Artorius could realize his desires in the shortest possible time. The only problem was one not ethical or moral issues. Agravain couldn't care less about that. Despite being an artificial being himself, he instinctively disapproved of the concept of creating homunculus. However, his responsibility and loyalty to the Empire outweighed any ethical concerns, allowing him to ignore such dilemmas. His worry still resided with the old issue Morgan Le Fay herself. I'll talk to Morgan, Artorius said. And besides, there must be more than just Morgan who possesses this technology, don't you think so? Indeed. Agravain nodded. Envisioning the future, a magnificent empire of British Romans, surpassing the long-gone Roman glory in its countless efficiencies, constructing a transcendent empire across the ages, he couldn't help but daydream. His gaze towards Artorius became even more fervent. Every time he discussed matters with Artorius, hearing his various ingenious ideas, Agravain felt a fanatical and proud sense of awe. This is the monarch I shall serve for life. Their discussion continued until 8 in the morning, after which they both appeared in the breakfast hall. There, just like Agravain, the imperial officials who arrived one after another were astonished, flustered, and even mentally perplexed by Artoria's presence. It wasn't until Artorius formally introduced Artoria and King Arthur appeared that they finally realized. They seemed to have understood everything completely. In this manner, Artoria quickly integrated herself into the imperial family. She established good relationships with the Knights of the Round Table, Emperor Artorius I, and the former king, Arthur. You are like another daughter to me, Arthur said to Artoria in a gentle tone. Hearing these words from someone who resembled her so closely made Artoria feel incredibly uncomfortable. Especially since she knew the true identity of this Arthur was just a flesh puppet created by Artorius using his third magic. The another daughter that Arthur referred to was clearly Mordred. Artoria felt uneasy about Artorius's twisted method of creating flesh puppets through the third magic and referring to Mordred as her own daughter. Because of these thoughts, she even ate much less breakfast, barely finishing a few bowls. Although Artorius whispered to her, "Don't show any flaws," she couldn't help but sneak glances, acting suspiciously. After all, she wasn't the kind of actor like Artorius. She couldn't seamlessly play two roles like a split personality, engaging in self-conversations. Chapter 107, Dancing. Artoria felt uneasy about Artorius's twisted method of creating humans through the third magic and referring to Mordred as her own daughter. Because of these thoughts, she even ate much less breakfast, barely finishing a few bowls. Although Artorius whispered to her, "Don't show any flaws," she couldn't help but sneak glances, acting suspiciously. After all, she wasn't the kind of actor like Artorius. She couldn't seamlessly play two roles like a split personality, engaging in self-conversations. Is this how Artorius sees me? It feels so strange. Watching Artorius manipulate Arthur, chatting and laughing with the other knights of the Round Table, Artoria's feelings were weird. It was like someone who watched their own selfie video for the first time and wondered, is that really me? Am I really that good? Artoria couldn't help but wonder as she looked at Artorius with admiration. If Artorius had been the one to draw the sword from the stone at the beginning, perhaps things would have gone more smoothly, and he would have done better than me. Humph. At the same time, watching this scene, Morgan couldn't help but let out a cold snort, feeling extremely displeased. This jerk is using me as a scapegoat again. Morgan scolded Artorius in her mind. Artoria's appearance, as claimed by Artorius, being another homunculus created by Morgan, with a fabricated tragic background, intensified the dissatisfaction of the Knights of the Round Table towards Morgan. Artoria's innocent and adorable nature, coupled with her being another artificial creation like them, made her feel like a younger sister to everyone. In a way, this meant that someone was bullying their little sister. If Artorius hadn't protected Morgan, someone might have already confronted her about it. Though Morgan didn't really care about how others viewed her, being used by Artorius still made her feel annoyed. "I'll make that guy explain himself," She thought to herself while her legs trembled and her inside became warmer and wet subconsciously. The situation went even more smoothly than Artorius had anticipated. With Artoria's arrival, Arthur that was created by him casually said, "Then I can rest assured." Arthur spoke of retiring to a beautiful place after the war, as if he were planning his future. Under Artorius's control, Arthur would become increasingly inclined to retire. At the appropriate time, he would leave the empire and settle down in a secluded place, disappearing from public view. Of course, in Artorius's plan, controlling Arthur for a longer time was not a big deal. It was just like rehearsing for when he would manipulate his so-called child in the future. However, Artoria disagreed. On instinct, she opposed Artorius's idea, and he didn't insist. It was just a minor pretense in public. To celebrate Christmas and the series of victories in the Empire's territories, a ball was held in Bordeaux. With Artorius in power and the change of times, balls quickly became popular entertainment, gradually replacing the shallow revelries of ancient Rome. Similarly, other trends emerged, such as cold buffet dinners, salons, and coffee, which amazed many despite the coffee beans being from the far lands of Africa and Arabia. During the ball, the first dance with Artorius, as tradition dictated, was still Morgan's. In the absence of an empress, she remained the most respected woman in the empire. Next was Scathatch, his teacher. After overcoming the problem of the fading of the age of gods by using a puppet body, Scathatch intended to stay in the empire permanently. As she said, she wanted to witness Artorius's journey to the end. At least until her interest waned, she would stay by his side. And why she ranked ahead of Mordred and the other noble ladies was another reason altogether. "Teacher, have you discussed anything with those Germanic peoples?" Artorius asked, smiling as he held her soft and slender hand. "It's something beneficial for you, after all." Scathatch replied casually. "Didn't I tell you before? I used to operate in the north for a while." "Did you?" "Didn't I?" Scathach's tone remained light. "Well, it's not a big deal, and now you know, don't you?" Scathatch assumed the guise she had used many years ago during her time in Northern Europe. She then consolidated forces in the Germanic region, and to some extent, took on the role of spokesperson for the Germanic peoples within the empire's territory and facilitated communication. For Artorius, this was indeed a good thing. Considering the future trend, the rise of the Germanic peoples was inevitable. Although the Round Table faction in the empire was currently the strongest, represented by Britain, their population was too small, and with the policies of ethnic integration, the Britons, British Celt, were bound to disappear. The same applied to the Western Romans or the Latin people, who were also tribes from the Age of Gods but would eventually be integrated into the Germanic. However, due to their large population base, the Latin lineage would be better preserved. Nevertheless, in the future of Europe, there would be no purely Latin lineage. In this situation, it was crucial for the empire to communicate and engage more with the Germanic peoples, ensuring their peaceful settlement within the empire's territory. Originally, marrying the princess of the Ostrogothic kingdom to secure an alliance with the Germanic peoples was a good idea. But now, it seemed that Artorius might have even better choices. "Kid, it seems like you're thinking of something cheeky," Scathatch whispered to Artorius as she leaned close to his ear. Her voice carried a hint of ambiguity and sweetness, making it hard for Artorius to tell if she was teasing him or flirting. Mordred, who was dancing with Artorius after Scathatch, pouted and looked unhappy, but fortunately, she was easily appeased with a few kind words and a gentle head pat. "I'm really sorry, little Mo. Omu, it's okay. As long as I can always be on your side." Originally, it was a good idea to marry Mordred to put the Knights of the Round Table at ease. However, looking at it now, Artorius had more and more choices. Mordred, being easy to deceive, quickly slid down from being the top candidate. Instead, there was another woman vying for the hearts of the Knights of the Round Table. That woman was Artoria. After finishing the dance with Mordred, Artoria was the fourth woman he invited. "Artorius. Don't say anything, father." Artorius gently held the girl's hand, clasping her waist, gazing at her affectionately, while also engaging in conversation. "Don't let anyone see any flaws. But, it's so embarrassing." Wearing women's clothes was one thing, but being seen by everyone, especially being held by her son while dancing gracefully with him, made Artoria feel shy. She would have blushed with embarrassment and made excuses to run away if she were her past self. But now, it was different. She really. Even though they were, but still. She felt like a puppet in her beloved son's hands, being led around by him. This is also for your sake, father. Artorius smiled mischievously and whispered in Artoria's ear, emphasizing her identity as Artoria the female knight. We must enrich Lady Artoria's character. A shy and innocent maiden knight who has never seen the world and a girl who always works hard. How? Do you like that, father? Hearing Artorius use the term father, even if Artoria was naive, she could detect a strong sense of delight in it. It's obvious, Artorius is just teasing me. Artoria thought this way and almost wanted to cry. She felt unjustly treated like this by her son, but apart from that, being embraced and treated gently by her beloved son also brought about an unprecedented and strange feeling. In fact, hugging and even kissing were not uncommon for her. But before, it was always done in her disguise as King Arthur, out of love. So there were no additional feelings involved. But now, it was different. Now, she was Artoria, Artorius's maiden knight, a woman. Under Artorius's continuous teasing both verbally and physically, Artoria felt as if she was about to faint. Fortunately, just before that could happen, Agravain brought important news. Your Majesty, forgive me, but the ball must end. The knight in black armor announced, dispersing the joyful atmosphere. It better be important, Sir Agravain. Artorius felt disappointed, and at the same time, Artoria sighed with relief and felt somewhat down, especially after the dance ended. But, he still held her hand, making her feel shy yet happy. The fake emperor has reached a peace agreement with Theodoric. He used the title of imperial governor, a substantial amount of gold, and a marriage contract to buy Theodoric off. The Ostrogoths have betrayed us, and the fake emperor has freed up his hands. Chapter 108, Easy Target. The fake emperor has reached a peace agreement with Theodoric. He used the title of imperial governor, a substantial amount of gold, and a marriage contract to buy Theodoric off. The Ostrogoths have betrayed us, and the fake emperor has freed up his hands. Could you give me more specific details? What exactly happened? Artorius asked calmly, and he listened attentively as the other person explained the intelligence. Since the entire Gaul was conquered, both the Western Roman Empire and the Ostrogoths were feeling uneasy. The Ostrogoths didn't value the alliance as the marriage proposal fell through. The history of the type moon, Nasu verse, and the real history known to Artorius diverged here. In Artorius's knowledge, the Ostrogoths successfully invaded Italy and established their kingdom. But in this world, the Ostrogoths were stopped by Lucius. They signed a ceasefire agreement, with the Ostrogoths ostensibly submitting to Lucius. This allowed Lucius to focus on countering Artorius. And that's precisely what he did. After returning to Ravenna, Lucius faced the questioning of the Senate and delivered a speech, declaring an irreconcilable conflict with Artorius. I will cut off the heads of traitors. I will subjugate Gaul, subjugate Germania, subjugate Britain, and all territories occupied by rebels. In my name and under the banner of the Roman Eagle, I will lead a force of 200,000 soldiers. It's indeed major news. Artorius mumbled, looking at Agravain's serious expression, then released his grasp on Artoria's hand. My knights, generals, and comrades. Artorius spoke out loudly, let's pause for a moment, we'll hold a meeting now. Seems like that fake emperor can't wait for us to kick his ass. Kay said loudly with a hint of sarcasm, prompting laughter from the surrounding knights. This playful banter helped alleviate the tension caused by Agravain's gloomy news. But they're just Romans. Gawain spoke up without hesitation, we've beaten them before. You're absolutely right. Lamorac's words brought even more liveliness to the scene. They couldn't even defeat the Ostrogoths and the Franks. His Majesty the Emperor Artorius I, is the one best suited to lead the empire. The atmosphere gradually turned fervent. The worries and fears arising from the news of the Western Roman Empire had completely vanished. All the blessings of fate, power, military, land, population, and resources are on my side. Artorius thought to himself at the same time. It's cold weather now, and it's not suitable for the Latins from the Mediterranean region to march north. After the recent war with the Ostrogoths and the loss of Gaul as a crucial resource area, the power of the Latins has greatly diminished. So, for the time being, Lucius cannot wage war. Of course, that's what Artorius thought, but he still ordered the generals ahead to hold the defensive lines and fortresses. Between the British Roman side and the Latin Roman side lies the long and difficult-to-cross Alps. Facing such natural defences, launching an attack would be extremely challenging for anyone. Even in modern times, during the Second World War, the French, with the advantage of these natural barriers, could easily fend off aggressors attempting to cross the Alps and attack Italy. "We don't need to worry for now," Artorius stated during the War Council. "We've deployed fortresses and armies in 30-some mountain passes, including Rhaetia, Lugdunum, and Lower Germania. Additionally, we have mobile forces ready to reinforce any of these fortresses at a moment's notice. If the fake emperor launches an offensive against us, all he'll meet is a failure." His words relaxed everyone, and the following discussions became more positive. After conquering Gaul, Italy and Spain were within easy reach, making it difficult to persuade any British Roman to halt their conquest. "So, Your Majesty, what's our next step?" Mordred asked eagerly, looking forward to a new war and gaining honor. "First, we employ strategic deception," Artorius replied calmly. "We create an appearance as if we're planning to cross the Alps, just like Hannibal did in the past, attacking Italy. This way, we'll divert all their attention and resources to the Italian region." "Yes, Your Majesty." "Then, we gather our naval forces at Brundisium. We'll need them for our next plan." "Yes, Your Majesty." At this point, the intelligent knights of the Round Table already had an idea of Artorius's upcoming targets. "Next, we'll attack Spain," Artorius said, a smile of delight forming on his lips. "Our forces will split into 3 routes. One will sail from Brundisium, traversing the Atlantic to attack the northern part of Spain. Another will depart from Massilia, sailing along the Mediterranean to attack the eastern part of Spain. I want to bring the 3 provinces under the control of the empire as quickly as possible." "As you wish, Your Majesty." As Artorius's words echoed, the generals of the empire stood up and performed the Roman military salute to Artorius. The war machine of the empire revved up once again. However, this time, Artorius didn't put forth his full effort. His empire's original 400,000 Germanic peoples mostly returned to civilian life, and only a select few were chosen to form the 3 legions. The empire's standing forces now numbered 100,000 soldiers. This figure might be a bit short of the Roman Empire's heyday, but it far surpassed those Germanic kingdoms that emerged after the fall of Rome. Neither the Franks nor the Goths, nor any of the Germanic kingdoms, ever maintained standing forces of 100,000 soldiers. After all, their identity lay there: they were Germanic peoples. Their core ethnicity mainly consisted of Germanic peoples. They couldn't assimilate the vast Latin population. The empire under Artorius's leadership was unique. He was an imperial official, a legitimate heir to the throne according to the Roman Empire's succession laws, but at the same time, he was also the king of Britain. Regardless of whether they were Celts, Latins, or Germanic peoples, they could all unite under his banner because Artorius embraced diversity, and racism was nearly non-existent. The number of core ethnic groups was sufficiently large, trustworthy, and naturally suited for military service. Such a vibrant empire was incomparable to the crumbling pseudo-empire led by Lucius Tiberius. When he claimed to command a force of 200,000 soldiers, it was merely a boast. Considering the weakened state of Italy, the barrenness of Spain, and the 3 regions of North Africa, it would already be commendable if he could maintain a force of 100,000 soldiers. Moreover, these 100,000 soldiers would be scattered across 3 non-adjacent regions, making it impossible for them to work together effectively. The Western Roman Empire was nothing but an easy target. And that's how the military meeting concluded. Artorius, accompanied by his newly appointed guard, Artoria, returned to his study. Just before Morgan or Mordred could arrive, he instructed. "You better perform well in the upcoming battles, Artoria." "Yes." When Artorius addressed her as Artoria, she hesitated for a moment before realizing he was talking to her. "I am still your father. Treating me like this is quite disrespectful." Artoria couldn't help but mutter under her breath, but on the surface, she maintained a submissive demeanor. All her resentment was saved for Morgan, who entered the room a little while later. As usual, Morgan came in, her eyes shining like a dog spotting a plate of delicious ribs, and made her way toward Artorius. Artoria glared at her fiercely, making Morgan notice the presence of another person beside Artorius. "Do you have any grievances against me, my daughter?" Morgan asked cheerfully, leaving Artoria speechless. In public, it was known that Artoria was an artificial being, a homunculus created by Morgan Le Fay. Just like Mordred, Gawain, Gaheris, Gareth, and Agravain, they were her children in theory. Humph! Because she had assumed this identity, Artoria caused Morgan to incur greater enmity from the clueless knights, ultimately leading her to owe Morgan a favor. Therefore, Artoria chose not to confront her sister, she simply snorted and turned her head away. Surprisingly, this attitude only seemed to please Morgan. "Don't be silent, my dear daughter." Morgan temporarily forgot about Artorius and approached Artoria, teasing her foolish little sister. "Is there something you're unhappy with? If so, just speak up. Since we're mother and daughter, we should get along well, no?" Morgan said playfully. "Don't push it too far, Morgan." Artoria grumbled with her lips pouted, glaring fiercely at Morgan. Wearing women's attire reduced her dignity and aura of authority, even making her feel inferior when facing Morgan. Her angry rebuke didn't anger Morgan, instead, it seemed to make her want to push further. Furious Artoria and mischievous Morgan. Thankfully, Artorius was present, or either of the Pendragon sisters might not survive the day. "Enough, Morgan." Artorius stopped her. "If you're bored, go and help at the Mages Association. It's been a long time since they started working on the next generation magecraft system, and there hasn't been any progress." "Why no progress? Your Majesty should know why, don't you?" After hearing Artorius's words, Morgan rolled her eyes, leaving him no room for further reproach. Currently, the Empire's Mages Association established by Artorius, with the Illuminati at its core, relied heavily on Morgan, Vivian, and Scathatch, the three female mages who were truly the most useful and effective. However, Scathatch needed to spend time training Artorius's troops, leaving little time for magecraft research. Morgan and Vivian as well as Mordred had their hands full trying to satisfy the Dragon Emperor's insatiable lusts. It was like trying to fill a bucket with a leaking bottom, it was an endless task. Besides being worn out, Morgan and Vivian could hardly get out of bed every day. And when they did manage to get up, they would seek revenge on Artorius, repeating this cycle endlessly. Naturally, they had no time left to research magecraft. Overall, it was Morgan's fault, but as a party involved, Artorius found it hard to say much when faced with her justified accusations. He could only awkwardly smile and pretend nothing had happened. Chapter 109, New Guard, Traitor, and Fake Emperor. Overall, it was Morgan's fault, but as a party involved, Artorius found it hard to say much when faced with her justified accusations. He could only awkwardly smile and pretend nothing had happened. Watching the interaction between Artorius and Morgan, discussing topics that Artoria couldn't comprehend, she couldn't help but feel very frustrated. Although she vaguely knew that her beloved son had a relationship with her wicked sister, the specifics of it were completely unknown to Artoria. At most, she could only imagine sweet kisses, holding hands, and cuddling together. Anything beyond that was a mystery to her, as she had never experienced it herself. As for the frequency and the amount of time Artorius spent with Morgan and others, she couldn't fathom it. The extent of their intimacy exceeded her imagination. But, not only Artoria, Morgan was also dissatisfied. Yesterday, after spending only 3 minutes in Artorius's study, she already wore a sullen expression. Today, she couldn't even manage to remove her underwear, all thanks to a presence named Artoria, acting as a third wheel. Sisterly relationships are so troublesome. Witnessing this scene, Artorius couldn't help but sigh, earning disapproving looks from the Pendragon sisters. In any case, the personnel changes around Artorius finally settled down. Artoria Pendragon, a new member of the Imperial Knights of the Round Table, replaced the former King Arthur as Artorius's guard and demonstrated excellent performance in the subsequent series of wars to conquer Spain. Due to the change in her status, she could no longer possess the Holy Lance Rongominiad, so she now equipped herself with the standard issue gear of the Knights of the Round Table, donning a set of a pure white sword, a frost-teal armor, and an icy blue lance, making her indistinguishable from other Knights of the Round Table. However, when it came to the battlefield, Artoria displayed exceptional performance. She exhibited formidable strength that surpassed ordinary Knights of the Round Table while facing the Roman legions on the Spanish front lines. Whether it was defeating the champion warriors of the Roman legions in one-on-one combat, slaying giants within the Roman army, or confronting the sea monsters summoned by heretic mages, Artoria demonstrated a terrifying prowess. Her remarkable achievements made the conquest of Spain by the British Romans seem as effortless as a military parade. The Roman legions of the Western Empire, the local garrisons of the three provinces, the roaming Visigoths, and the Swiba people, all the forces opposing the empire, crumbled before the Great Legion. Artoria was at the forefront of the imperial army, the champion of the emperor, and the embodiment of empire glory. She's just like a female version of King Arthur. More than one Knights of the Round Table couldn't help but exclaim like that. Thus, in the year 487, after the British Roman conquered Spain, during the commendation ceremony, the former King Arthur Pendragon bestowed his beloved lance, Rong Ominiad, upon Artoria. From now on, I entrust you with the duty to guard my son. Arthur's face remains as attractive as ever, resembling Artoria's as if they were carved from the same mold. Though his appearance won't age, his eyes betray the weight of the years, and his body shows signs of decline. Although there was no concrete evidence, everyone felt that Arthur's health was deteriorating. He had once declared, once the fake emperor is defeated, I'll retreat to a beautiful and serene place. That declaration seemed to be on the verge of realization. As they witnessed this scene, many Knights of the Round Table and former retainers from Britain couldn't help but feel down, even shedding tears. But Artoria, the person concerned, had a completely different reaction. That sly Artorius. Always using me to entertain himself. Watching Arthur's affectionate yet weary expression, Artoria had to suppress the urge to punch the impostor in front of her and forced a very awkward smile. I understand. Through clenched teeth, Artoria told the impostor, in the future, I will continue to serve His Majesty faithfully and remain loyal to the Empire. Then I can rest easy. The gracious Arthur nodded, seemingly relieved of a burden. Upon seeing this, tears welled up in the eyes of the Knights of the Round Table. The Pendragon had once again continued its legacy. Pfttt, phew phew phew. At the same time, Morgan couldn't hold back her laughter. Although she always acted like a proper sister to Artoria because of Artorius, she couldn't help but feel delighted when she saw her sister's frustration. The other Knights of the Round Table glared at her, but Morgan didn't care. Except for Artorius, she didn't give a damn about anyone else in this world. The world can burn for all she cares. The British Roman were ecstatic due to their victories, the influx of new territories, and the abundance of spoils. However, in the Western Roman Empire located in Italy, a dark cloud of misery hung over the land. As the British Roman conquered Spain, the North African provinces of the Western Empire fell completely, and the Vandals took control of these lands. Consequently, the once formidable Western Roman Empire, which had once held half of Rome, now dwindled into a medium-sized nation confined to a corner of Italy. The crisis in Rome had never been so immense before. Roman Emperor, hey, what an irony, but I won't give up without a fight. That was the bitter thought of the distressed Lucius. He always believed that he still had a chance for a dramatic comeback. That was when the traitor, Artorius, led his army into Italy. Lucius planned to personally lead his troops to defeat the traitor and then kill him. Lucius knew that the 18-year-old Artorius, who had not yet sired an heir, posed the greatest threat to his empire. If he could kill Artorius, everything would fall into place. Artorius's generals would fight amongst themselves, and the once vast empire would crumble and disintegrate, just like Alexander or Attila's empires of old. This will work, this will solve everything. Lucius thought, ignoring the growing strength of the Germanic peoples, the empire's fragmentation, and his own weakening power. He was now really desperate, with no time to worry about such matters. As long as I can kill Artorius, my empire still has hope. Killing him will bring rebirth to my empire. At the same time, in Brundigala, Artorius Pendragon, the so-called self-proclaimed emperor and traitor according to Lucius, had completely different thoughts. In his study, a seemingly humble Latin man kept smiling and accompanying him. Anyone who could make the emperor take time out of his busy schedule was undoubtedly no ordinary person. He was an envoy, representing a group of long-established nobles in Italy, known as the Noble Alliance, who held influence in the Senate, the military, the imperial government, the church, and even around Lucius. Their purpose for meeting the new emperor was clear: to sell Italy at a good price. That barbarian general, or rather, our future emperor Artorius, will definitely not refuse this gift. Italy is the most important gem in the empire's crown. If he wants to possess it, he must cooperate with us. Our actions will ensure that we retain enough power and influence in the future empire, he. That was the wishful thinking of the Latin nobles, who appeared confident in their calculations just before sending the envoy, but unfortunately, they had misjudged the situation and encountered the wrong person. Artorius's plan was to build a brand new empire, free from the corruption and decay represented by these parasitic nobles. He had no intention of maintaining their positions or ruling the country through them. Their vineyards, olive groves, farmlands, trading workshops, countless slaves, craftsmen, servants, and even private armies, accumulated over hundreds of years, were all targets for Artorius. These assets would be confiscated and integrated into his empire's property, used to reward deserving individuals, or distributed among the commoners to gain their support and enrich the treasury. The empire's current officials were busy growing homunculus, while the future officials would have to undergo civil service exams after education was more widely available. So, for these scheming opportunist nobles, Artorius had nothing but a stern warning, ordering them to surrender and switch sides. He declared to the envoy, "I am the only legitimate and rightful emperor of the empire. The invasion of Italy is just and right. This is not the empire's destruction, but its rebirth. Before my grand army, you and those behind you have no choice: survival or destruction. It's all up to you. You have nowhere to retreat and nowhere to hide. Either take up arms and fight my army like men until the bitter end and get crushed, or kneel and obey my orders. There is no third option." "Why yes, of course." The envoy could only nod continuously and respond to Artorius's words, swearing that he would return and persuade the nobles not to provoke this dreadful man. In the face of such a terrifying yet authoritative emperor, their once arrogant sense of superiority as Roman nobles vanished completely. The Roman nobles were known for their flexibility. Hundreds of years of political life had taught them how to behave in the presence of a strong ruler. If they failed, their entire family would be ruined. And so, in the autumn of that year, with a bountiful harvest, Artorius's fleet engaged in consecutive battles with the Italian fleet in the Mediterranean Sea, while his main army successfully crossed the Alps. The mountain passes, controlled by the Roman nobles, opened up for the new emperor's forces. Thus, the Roman nobles, in their ridiculousness, unknowingly aided the one who sought their downfall and betrayed Lucius, their true protector. Under the leadership of Emperor Artorius, 7 legions and an army of 60,000 safely traversed the once formidable Alps and gained plentiful supplies, secure camps, and knowledgeable guides. The path to Ravenna was clear, and the end of the fake emperor's reign was imminent. Chapter 110, Long Live the Dragon Emperor. Ha ha. Ha ha ha. Ha 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 ha. When the news of Artorius leading his 100,000 troops and marching towards Ravenna reached the emperor's palace, Lucius Tiberius burst into mad, gleeful laughter. His loyal ministers, fools, and unlucky souls who were still gathered around him exchanged glances, feeling a sense of fear. They thought that the emperor must have gone mad from receiving such terrible news. Especially since he had heard about the Gothic raid, the Vandals landing in Sicily from the south, and the Eastern Emperor Zeno sending a fleet to attack the Italian coast. Being surrounded on all sides was perilous enough, and even a vast empire might not withstand it, let alone the current state of the empire, which seemed as shaky as a pill. "This is what I wanted to see," Lucius then said. "I will defeat that traitor in a pitched battle, twist his head off, and after that, the empire will return to its rightful order. Everyone will understand that I am the true emperor." After hearing his words, even the most loyal generals could only look at each other in bewilderment. No one dared to speak, which irritated Lucius. He said with a dissatisfied tone, "Don't you understand? Don't you get it? The biggest mistake of that traitor is that he still claims to be a part of Rome. Can't you see what that implies?" Then, Your Majesty. Sirius, the former governor of Gaul, gathered his courage and asked, "What does it imply?" After Artorius occupied almost all of Gaul, the man who once saw Artorius as his greatest rival and opponent, fled back to Italy in a pitiful state. Without an army and stripped of power, and with the added problem of his poor relations with the British Roman, he didn't even have a chance to change sides. He could only cling to Lucius and hope that the emperor would pull off a miraculous victory so that he could regain his position. But seeing Lucius acting like this, he felt hopeless. He had no other option but to play along. "It means that I still have a chance to reclaim those territories. Those lands still belong to Rome. I am the legitimate Roman emperor. As long as I defeat that traitor, those territories will return to my rule." Lucius shouted with excitement. But looking at the emperor's exhilaration, Sirius felt a chill in his heart. The emperor had truly gone mad. "We are doomed. Isn't that Artorius's side mainly comprised of Germanic and Celtic peoples, while our Latin Rome is another matter altogether? Even if you were to defeat him, do you really think those Germanic and Celtic barbarians will obediently listen to you?" Thinking like this in his heart, Sirius, along with the loyal, unlucky, and foolish Romans around him, had no other choice but to force smiles and cheer for the long life of the emperor. With such a leader, it was no surprise that the Western Empire army was defeated by the rebel forces in the Battle of Ravenna. No, he shouldn't call them rebels. They should be referred to as the Holy and Great Legions of the Roman Empire. After all, they were the victors. The entire Italy had fallen under their control. With the annexation of Italy, the traditional sphere of influence of the Western Roman Empire was now reduced only to North Africa. However, considering the current situation, it seemed like it was only a matter of time before that too would be under their control. Indeed, even the Vandals, who occupied a small part of North Africa, were no match for the new emperor. Under Artorius's rule, the influence of the Roman Empire had surpassed that of its golden era. The northern part of Britain and Ireland, which had previously halted the mighty Hadrian, were now part of the empire which was Artorius's. If one were to call this victory insignificant, then the unprecedented feat of incorporating the Germanic tribes, who had continuously inflicted pain upon the empire for centuries and were unconquerable even during Rome's prime into the empire, would certainly be an outstanding achievement. Artorius was an emperor like no other. He didn't just overshadow figures like Lucius, he stood tall even when compared to history's most famous emperors Caesar, Augustus, and Aurelian. Artorius stood shoulder to shoulder with them and even surpassed them. Thus, Lucius's delusion was merely a delusion. Utterly pitiful. In the Battle of Ravenna, Lucius had gathered his last 3 Roman legions and met a painful defeat. One legion turned traitor on the verge of battle. Another collapsed in an instant. The last legion loyal to Lucius until the end, was reduced to ashes under Artorius's sword beam. With that, Lucius Tiberius, who once ruled an entire empire, was left with nothing but himself and his imperial sword, Florence. I should have. At that very moment, as he confronted Artorius and his formidable troops, Lucius felt lost, uneasy, and unwilling. After drifting in a daze for a while, a sudden realization dawned upon him. In the end, he was defeated by a man named Artorius Pendragon. He was inferior to Artorius in everything. Inferior in strength, and lacking the intelligence and capability that Artorius possessed. From the moment Artorius left Britain and joined the Roman Empire, everything had been set. What kind of monster is my enemy? As he realized everything, Lucius knew that his end was near. However, even in death, he wanted to die charging forward, bravely. Even if he was the only one. Artorius. Roaring with all his might, he charged toward the opposing 100,000 troops. Then, something unexpected happened. Artorius's powerful legion did not attack. No cannons, arrows, crossbows, or anything else. Those formidable knight orders, unmatched heroes, and elite troops equipped with a multitude of magical weapons, none of them launched an assault against him. At the forefront, warriors clad in enchanted plate armor split into 2 lines, creating a pathway, allowing Lucius to face his mortal enemy directly. There, Artorius Pendragon stood calmly without expression. Several seconds later, he charged toward Lucius. Clang! The Sword Emperor's sword clashed fiercely against the sword of the Dragon Emperor. Lucius, as strong as a bear, glared fiercely at Artorius, who was clad in frost-silver armor. What's this supposed to be? Pity? You bastard! I don't need your pity. The crimson and golden sword after images clashed violently before parting ways. I just feel like this is something I should handle myself. Artorius said, his eyes flickering. After all, you're an emperor too. I want to make your death a dignified one. Ha 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 ha. Upon hearing Artorius's words, Lucius sarcastically laughed, you think you've already won. When I twist your head off, I'll take pleasure in seeing your contorted face. Then go ahead and try. Ha 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 ha. Amidst the maniacal laughter, Lucius went all out, launching an attack towards Artorius. In an instant, they exchanged hundreds of moves, a spectacle rivaling Artorius's battle with Clovis back then. As the fight progressed, Artorius confirmed that Lucius was truly worthy of the title of Sword Emperor. He was undoubtedly one of the most powerful warriors of his time. Even under Artorius's command, only a few heroes could match him. Gawain, Lancelot, Lamorak, Mordred, these renowned knights couldn't hold a candle to Lucius. The only one who could defeat him was Artoria. However, even with such a formidable strength, Lucius was not Artorius's match. With each powerful swing of his sword, Lucius's stamina diminished significantly. In an instant, Hundreds of moves had taken a toll on his mind, will, and body. In the first 10 minutes, they seemed evenly matched. But in the following half-hour, Lucius found himself at a disadvantage. By the 40th minute of continuous fighting, he was covered in numerous wounds, barely able to defend, dodge, and protect himself. With the blessings of gods and the bloodline of ancestral Romulus, Lucius, the last savior of Rome, could still become tired, exhausted, and injured. Artorius, on the other hand, would not. His recovery is this strong. Despite managing to inflict some damage on Artorius, it healed in an instant. Does he have limitless stamina? While Lucius struggled to catch his breath and felt exhausted, Artorius's breathing remained steady as an immovable mountain, showing no signs of fatigue from the beginning of the fight. Not to mention, an indescribable sense of annoyance and unease had plagued Lucius from the start of the fight, haunting him relentlessly. My swordsmanship, my skills, my speed, strength, reflexes, he surpasses me in every aspect. Realizing this, Lucius fought on in a mixture of shock and fury but eventually fell to defeat. His arm was severed, then a leg. Lying on the ground, he was rendered defenseless under Artorius's foot. Intense pain, a sense of loss, and the despair of defeat caused life to fade away from his body. Will you make this country better? Lucius gazed at Artorius, hoping for an answer. Of course. Artorius replied without hesitation, after all, this is my empire. Good, then you are. Before Lucius could finish his sentence, Excalibur pierced his throat. I am the emperor. Artorius looked at Lucius, who desperately tried to make a sound, and said, no need for anyone to acknowledge it. Know your place. With these words, Artorius withdrew his sword, and arterial blood sprayed high, some even landing on his cheek. Ignoring this minor issue, Artorius turned around and looked at his troops. Celts of Britain, tribes of Germania and Gauls, as well as Latins of Spain and Italy all united around him now. The fake emperor is dead. Rejoice! May the dragon emperor live long! Glory to Artorius I! As Agravain fervently yelled, 100,000 troops raised their right arms in unison. Long live the dragon emperor! Glory to Artorius I! Long live the dragon emperor! Glory to Artorius I! Long live the dragon emperor! Glory to Artorius I! The resounding voices shook the battlefield, reaching up to the heavens. Chapter 111, The Holy Roman Empire. It's over. The war finally came to an end. Chaos, disorder, barbarian invasions, internal strife, and unrest, all the calamities had left the land of Rome. Since 286 AD, when Emperor Diocletian first ascended to the throne, the Roman Empire gradually divided into eastern and western parts. It wasn't until 486 AD that Artorius became emperor and brought some semblance of peace. Over the span of 2 centuries, the empire endured invasions by the Huns and waves of Germanic peoples entering its borders. Countless upheavals and unrest accompanied their incursions into the empire's territories. The empire grew weaker and more helpless, and many thought it was on the brink of collapse. However, they turned out to be mistaken. At its darkest hour, the empire experienced a remarkable resurgence under the rule of Emperor Artorius I, ushering in a new era of glory. After defeating Lucius Tiberius, Artorius's armies swiftly took control of all of Italy and easily defeated the Vandals, who had invaded the southern regions and landed in Sicily, as well as the Ostrogoths who came from the east to challenge the Eastern Roman Empire. Following a series of small-scale battles, these nations recognized the newfound power of the Western Roman Empire under Emperor Artorius, a force they could not contend with. Since war was not an option, diplomacy became the way forward. The Vandals, Ostrogoths, and Eastern Roman Empire each sent envoys to Orleans, the temporary capital of the new empire, and signed peace agreements with the emperor. Emperor Anastasius I of the Eastern Roman Empire recognized Emperor Artorius I of the Western Roman Empire as the legitimate rulers of their respective empires, maintaining the appearance of unity within Rome. This emperor, unlike his predecessor Zeno, prioritized economic and legal matters over expansion and warfare. He reformed Rome's taxation system and enriched the treasury, laying a solid foundation for future emperors. Meanwhile, the Eastern Roman Empire was plagued and too busy by constant internal turmoil due to religious issues. Under these circumstances, the peace between Artorius and the Eastern Roman Empire could continue. After the Eastern Roman Empire refused to engage in conflict with the new Western Roman Empire, the Ostrogoths and Vandals also backed down. Faced with the powerful new empire, these two weak Germanic kingdoms chose to submit. Of course, this submission was mostly symbolic. Artorius decided to temporarily spare them as his empire needed time to recuperate from the continuous warfare over the past 2 years. In the future, these two kingdoms wouldn't pose any more trouble for Artorius. According to history, later on, the future emperor of the Eastern Roman Empire Justinian I, driven by ambition, launched campaigns to conquer both Germanic kingdoms. Eventually, he succeeded in toppling them for good. The Vandals and Ostrogoths, like countless countries that have risen and fallen throughout history, turned into mere dust in the annals of history. Their significance was merely a few lines in historical texts. After the external wars concluded, the new empire was fully engaged in enthusiastic internal development. Emperor Artorius launched an ambitious 5-year plan that included the construction of a new road and transportation network, utilizing cement to repair old roads and build new Roman highways. Canals were dug, waterways were dredged, and a tram system was attempted. Shipyards and lumber mills also bustled with activity. The Mediterranean, North Sea, and Baltic Sea trade, which had dwindled with the collapse of the Western Roman Empire and the rise of the Germanic peoples, was set to thrive once more. The foundation that underpinned this comprehensive transportation and infrastructure development was the empire's greatly enhanced agricultural level. The Black Forest of Germania would be cleared, and marshlands filled in. New farms and pastures would be established in great numbers. With the fall of the Western Roman Empire and the rise of the Germanic peoples, the Little Ice Age passed. The Earth's temperature warmed once again, heralding an era suitable for human habitation and cultivation. The government of the empire would undergo reforms. The empire's laws, tax systems, and economic structures would be reformed. Even the empire itself would bear a new name: the Holy Roman Empire. All these changes signaled that the empire was about to enter a golden age. Of course, there was still one prerequisite: talent. The empire lacked enough talented individuals and a sufficient number of competent civil servants. Without them to construct the government and carry out orders, all the reforms in the empire would be in vain. Fortunately, Artorius had long been prepared. Year 489, Orleans. Deep beneath the capital city of the Holy Roman Empire, within the vast magic factory, thousands of homunculus had completed their final adjustments in the cultivation chambers. The emperor of the empire, Artorius I, draped in purple robes, stood by these transparent chambers, eagerly examining the lifelike homunculus within. "How do you like them?" Morgan, one of the emperor's most cherished concubines, spoke with a proud tone. "They are quite spectacular, aren't they? We can now mass-produce exceptional homunculus. The cultivation cycle takes only a month, requiring just a bit of nutrient fluid and biological factors to create an endless supply of slaves. They are absolutely loyal and fearless, with an IQ surpassing 160. Their physical abilities and magic circuits outperform ordinary people, and there are no issues with a short lifespan. We've categorized the requirements into 3 types. The first consists of officials to fill military ranks, the second includes researchers skilled in magecraft, technology, and mathematics to provide assistance, and the third comprises civil servants equipped with expertise in governance and administration. These homunculi are capable of fulfilling any demand you may have, Your Majesty." Morgan moved closer to the emperor and reached out to touch Artorius's face, though her attempt was quickly thwarted as he caught her hand. "Remember, you promised me a reward, right?" Her eyes sparkled with delight, and it was evident what she desired as her prize. However, an irritating voice interjected: "After consuming so many resources from the empire and drawing numerous mages, failing to achieve results would be utterly laughable." It was Scathatch who spoke, earning a furious glare from Morgan. "Besides, it's not just your merit alone, is it?" Vivian also participated. Morgan was left speechless by Scathach's remark. Meanwhile, Vivian, the silver-haired and red-eyed fairy with limited screen time of late, turned curiously towards them and tilted her head. She grinned happily when Artorius reached out to head-pat her. Like Scathatch, Vivian now inhabited an artificial body, not the homemade puppet-like version but a second-generation one crafted by Artorius himself. Aside from being essentially more human rather than a fairy, her new body was nearly identical to her previous form. In this new form, Vivian could freely interact with the outside world and spend her days happily with Artorius, which made her feel like she never wanted to return to Avalon. When Scathatch mentioned her, Vivian, who had been educated well by Artorius, couldn't help but focus on the cultivation chamber where a similar-looking homunculus with silver hair and red eyes lay. It turns out that while creating these homunculi, Vivian had mixed some of her own characteristics into certain ones, resulting in a batch of homunculus bearing her resemblance. These silver-haired and red-eyed homunculi gave Artorius a sense of déjà vu, but after some consideration, he decided not to delve too deeply into it. "Now, one last thing," Scathatch said, leaving Morgan embarrassed and speechless after her previous heated exchange. "Do the rewards you seek truly hold any meaning? Even if you achieve nothing, Artorius will always make you content, won't he?" Morgan clenched her teeth, angered by Scathach's words. "Enough quarreling over such matters." Artorius intervened, soothing the situation. Lately, he couldn't help but notice that Scathach's words had become increasingly harsh and sharp. Perhaps witnessing his interactions with Morgan and the others had left her feeling restless and frustrated. If that were indeed the case, he should find a way to ease her worries. "You've all done an excellent job," Artorius praised Morgan and Vivian. "Every mage involved in this project will be credited, and an additional month's pay will be provided. Everyone will be pleased." Hearing Artorius's words, Morgan continued happily, "You're right, everyone will be pleased." While construction on the Empire's surface thrived, internal developments followed a similar course. Merlin was right, he had many acquaintances on the mystery side, including some who could be considered enemies. During the first meeting of the Illuminati, he had promised to help Artorius recruit members. However, that ended up being nothing but a disappointment. "I'm trying so hard, but nobody wants to join the Illuminati. I wonder why?" "Poor me, it's so troublesome," Merlin said carelessly and casually, without care. Artorius managed to restrain himself from hitting him while watching Merlin, who furrowed his brow as if asking, "Why are you so upset?" The true force that significantly boosted the Illuminati's power was still the Empire's resounding success. As the Empire's territory expanded and its strength grew, a significant number of mages, who held high hopes for the Empire's future, pledged their allegiance. Even the mysterious factions of this world, the Wandering Sea and the Atlas Academy, had to show respect to the Empire by dispatching mages to carry out its orders and formally accepting its leadership. However, the largest number of new members within the Illuminati consisted of those who were once independent or were expelled by the Wandering Sea and the Atlas Academy. In the original timeline, they formed an organization known as the Clock Tower and became the most active mage organization of the next generation, without a doubt. Many even equated the Clock Tower with the Mages Association. But now, they had become an internal force of the Empire. They became members of the Illuminati. It was their efforts that enabled the Illuminati to accomplish the magic network utilization, magic power systems, electricity applications, and mass production of homunculus projects in the shortest amount of time. Artorius liked to break traditions. Under his leadership, the mages who used to prefer solo-style magic workshops transformed towards more scientific research teams and large-scale magic factories. With the motivation of magical supply, technology, honors, knowledge, and wealth provided by the Empire, the mages erupted with unparalleled enthusiasm and research efficiency. A bright future was beckoning Artorius and his empire. Chapter 112, Empire's Path and Summoning. The homunculus system is complete. Now, it's time to ignite the divine flame. Infinite energy can be achieved not only through third magic but also through a scientific approach. Especially after the end of the Age of Gods. We need to establish a technological system that doesn't rely on true ether. After a satisfying inspection of the homunculus factory, on their way back to the palace, Artorius spoke to the three women Morgan, Scathatch, and Vivian. The so-called ignition of the divine flame and infinite energy are essentially the same things. Modern people should be familiar with it. It's the concept of nuclear fusion. This modern scientific breakthrough is what Artorius aims to obtain. It is also the first step towards his envisioned journey into the universe. To break free from the constraints of the counterforce and escape the Earth-Moon system, Artorius has two paths before him. One path involves spiritual enlightenment, like that of a cultivator, obtaining unparalleled power to punch Gaia and kick Alea, propelling humanity into the universe. At first glance, this path seems simple, as if fate will pave the way. However, Artorius finds it unreliable and uncertain. Regardless of his spiritual cultivation and whether reaching that level is feasible, he can't ignore his desires, ambition, and lust. Inevitably, he was fated to make the women's breasts grow bigger with each squeeze. Under such circumstances, he fears he may never achieve the level of enlightenment. If he forces himself to do that cultivation nonsense thing, just sitting forever waiting for some enlightenment, he might even stray from the right path and become possessed by evil. This world is not a cultivation world anyway. No Chinese nonsense like countless young masters who opposed him, and when losing, their ancestors and great-ancestors will hunt him, and the endless cycle continued. Since this so-called simple path seems unfeasible, he must choose the other path. That is the development of technology, not just the original world's technology but also a fusion with magecraft, learning from each other and advancing together. The marvels created in the Type Moon world unintentionally or intentionally prove the potential of this path. In the world of C.C.C., where the era of magecraft ended, the mages of the old world have disappeared, and the era of mystery has drawn to a complete close. The mages embraced technology and headed in the opposite extreme direction. They called themselves Spiritron hackers. Of course, the order and world structure of that timeline were different, with giant multinational corporations ruling the world, and such a grim future is not what Artorius desires. He wants far more than that, something not even some crappy AI could fulfill. But he can't deny the potential power of that fusion. Spiritron hacker can indeed change the world. One path emphasizes individual greatness and transcendence. The other path relies on collective wisdom and surpassing limitations. As a reincarnator, even though he has spent more time and experienced more in the Type Moon world rather than his original world, he ultimately chose the latter path. But, there is actually a third option. That is Artorius's devout prayer. Oh, Great Mother from the servant universe, your son is being bullied by the counter-force. Please bring your spaceship with the dark rounds and wear the holy lance armor of Alan to help me. Ha ha ha, what is that? I must have gone crazy. It's not just laughable, it's beyond laughable. Artorius dismissed the idea as he thought about it. This is just the beginning. After the inspection, he would return to his sleeping chamber to reward Morgan and Vivian. Artorius was feeling quite good. He even spoke more to them. The seeds we planted today are destined to grow into towering trees that will elevate humanity to unprecedented heights. Yes, yes, said Morgan nonchalantly. What slightly bothered Artorius was that the three women, whether it was Scathatch, Vivian, or Morgan, seemed uninterested in his words. Scathatch merely smiled, saying nothing. Vivian and Morgan were even worse. They seemed distracted, their attention seemingly focused on other matters. Though this other matter could also bring the Dragon Emperor satisfaction, he currently desired their admiration, passion, and praise. At times like this, he really missed Agravain. The Imperial Chancellor, who had experienced a wild receding hairline these 2 years, was his most devoted worshipper. Whenever he made leadership speeches, Agravain would have a fervent face like a fanatic cultist, making Artorius feel fulfilled. Of course, his mother Artoria was also good. Over the past 2 years, Artoria had been dressed in women's clothing, darting around him, making it difficult for Artorius to continue calling her father. King Arthur had completely withdrawn, transforming into the knight Artoria. And the father had become the mother. The times were still progressing, and the empire entered a period of stability. Internally, they began construction and divided administrative regions. Externally, they maintained diplomatic relations with the Ostrogoths, Vandals, and the Eastern Empire while starting to expand outward. The modern-day Poland, Ukraine, and Russia, which were the traditional territories of the Slavs, were the future targets of the empire's expansion. The Knights of the Round Table led one small unit after another to these regions for reconnaissance, exploration, mapping, commercial trade, and diplomatic probing. In the short term, the empire would not launch an attack on the Slavs. As scattered tribes still in the tribal stage, they posed no threat to the Holy Roman Empire. After finished rewarding Morgan and Vivian in his sleeping chamber, Artorius pondered. For the next few decades, the empire will remain stable. Under my rule, the empire will recover and develop even better. My path is thoroughly open. I have achieved success, at least preliminary success. Those members of the Senate who have completely submitted in fear and admire me. If it were still the age of gods, I would likely become one of the gods, just like that Romulus. In terms of politics, I have Agravain and the homunculus officials. I can be at ease. Then the main target for the future would be the mystery side, right? While pondering this question, Vivian and Morgan had already fallen into an exhausted slumber at Artorius's side. Watching the contented faces of the women around him, he let out a long sigh of relief. We did it. At last, we succeeded. I've saved Britain, saved the people I love. History has been altered by me. Though the future remains uncertain, at least for now, I can take a breath and rest a bit. With these thoughts in mind, Artorius was ready to shut his eyes and catch a quick nap with his beloved women, but before that. A-hole. Counterforce. That doesn't seem right. What the fuck is this? In front of Artorius, a hole suddenly appeared, leading to the unknown. Is it a path to the root? To a parallel world? Or to an alien planet? Why does it appear here? What is the reason? Is it a conspiracy? As Artorius pondered these questions, he also noticed a voice. A devout and familiar voice summoned him with a spell chant that he recognized. I hereby declare. Your body shall serve under me. My fate shall be your sword. Submit to the beckoning of the Holy Grail. If you will submit to this will and this reason, then answer. An oath shall be sworn here. I shall attain all virtues of all of heaven. I shall have dominion over all evils of all of hell. Holy Grail War? What the fuck? As the incantation echoed clearly in Artorius's ears, the Dragon Emperor also confirmed the location of the whole connection and the outcome of accepting the invitation. He would appear in the Fourth Holy Grail War as a heroic spirit, participating in the battle for the Holy Grail. With this in mind, a playful smile curled up on his lips. What a coincidence, seems like a good vacation spot. I happen to have some free time. Feeling pretty good too. So, wait, what's that sound? Suddenly, Artorius felt something was amiss. He raised his head, got up from the bed, and went to look out the window. At the same time, the people of the Empire in Orleans were shaken by the enormous monster descending from the sky. It looked extremely futuristic, like a spaceship. It exuded a sense of terror and chaos. Witnessing the descent of this gigantic spaceship, people experienced intense shock on a soul level. Fear, astonishment at seeing a creation beyond imagination, and longing it should have been all so very, very beautiful, but this beauty, like a boy's dream, was disrupted by a sunny, lively, and somewhat silly voice from inside the spaceship. Hey, son. Your mother is here to save you. Where are the enemies? Watch me. Oh shoot, the system's malfunctioning. Emergency landing. Emergency landing. The similarity between that voice and Artorius's most favored knight, Artoria, was 99.99999% striking. At the same time, the heavy sci-fi spaceship headed straight in the direction of Artorius's palace, descending with a series of blue lights and explosions, faster and faster. Wait! What the hell? Amidst Artorius's cries of shock and anger, and the wailing of the person who resembled Artoria, the spaceship crashed onto the palace, collapsing a large portion of it. At the same time, a person dressed in peculiar attire and bearing a resemblance to Artoria was thrown out from the spaceship, crashing right onto Artorius. Her hip bone made contact with Artorius's nose, and then both of them passed through the hole, disappearing without a trace. T/N, Brew. == Author's note. Volume 1 has wrapped up, and the next volume will take us into the vacation arc with the new mother. Chapter 113, Einsborn and Ancestor, I. A bonus chapter for reaching 1K Power Stone yesterday, thanks for the support. It was the spring of 1994. The Holy Grail War was still some time away from its official commencement. Deep within the Black Forests of Germany, secluded from the outside world, lay the Einsborn Castle. The Einsborn, proud of their prestigious mage bloodline, looked down upon other mages, considering them mere barbarians. However, driven to madness by their pursuit of the Holy Grail and the Third Magic, the Einsborn family had finally crossed a line. They had chosen a son-in-law from among outsiders, granting him honor and power as a member of their family, and sending him as their representative to participate in the Holy Grail War. This action not only brought shame upon the family, but it also disgraced their ancestor from the Age of Gods, the founder of the modern era, and even the ordinary homunculi within the family. To make matters worse, it now appeared that this decision, which had caused the entire family to feel disgraced, was entirely unnecessary. If one were to ask the current head of the Einsborn family, the wise, elderly, and Gandalf-looking, Justitiate von Einsborn about his feelings, he would undoubtedly say, I regret it. I just feel so regretful now. Confronted with the summoning of a great being through the servant system, Justitiate felt both awe and fear. If I had known it would turn out like this, I shouldn't have hired that outsider, since it became like this, our pursuit of the Holy Grail and the third magic is... Ah, no. Why am I blabbering such nonsense? Please forgive this one, Your Majesty. Despite several days passing and the family accepting this exceptional summoning, Justitiate still found it hard to contain his excitement when faced with the source of the Einsborn family's long-cherished wish, standing right before him. Don't be too nervous, Justitiate. At the same time, a breathtakingly attractive boy with radiant platinum hair took the central spot in the living room without hesitation. He spoke in a relaxed manner, and his body was completely at ease, reclining in the chair as he was served by a group of Einsborn maids. Behind him, a maid with white hair and red eyes was massaging his shoulders, while two other maids with the same appearance massaged his arms. Below, two more maids with white hair and red eyes were massaging his legs. He appeared entirely at ease, indulgent, and decadent. After uttering a word, the boy lightly tapped the chair's armrest. Immediately, a maid graciously offered him sweet coffee and snacks, feeding him bit by bit. Of course, this behavior was limited to when Justitiate was present. Otherwise, the boy, or rather, Artorius would indulge in way more outrageous things, such as the pious chalice and the seaweed wine. Although there had been a slight mishap on the way here, Artorius's purpose and attitude remained unchanged. He had come here primarily for vacation and enjoyment. He would play for a few days and then return home. Anything else achieved would be a bonus, but if not, it didn't matter. Being summoned by the Einsborn this time was considered quite satisfactory. The family lacked nothing except cute homunculus girls. Indulging a few hundred for Artorius's pleasure was no big deal at all. Although he couldn't say that to Justitiate. After finishing the coffee and snacks and patting the maid's breasts, expressing his satisfaction, Artorius simultaneously heard a lively and somewhat silly voice outside. Behold! The heroine's ripple dash! X special move, dynamic laser beam! Ah ha ha ha! There was a scene that seemed to show a girl resembling Artoria, playing with the adorable white-haired girl, Ilias Veil von Einsborn, commonly called Ilia. They had become close friends and would often play together in the snow in front of the Einsborn castle every other day. The playful girl and the adorable little girl were enjoying their game of the righteous heroine, X, battling the evil saber, the offspring of the evil Artoria species. The sound of their laughter indicated they were having a great time. Looking out the window, one could see the scene, and standing nearby with a smile on her face was the beautiful lady named Iris Veil von Einsborn, or simply Iri, the lady of the Einsborn family. She was pleased with the heartwarming scene. On the other hand, the supposed mage killer was nowhere to be seen. No one knew what he was up to. The Holy Grail War, what a boring joke. Upon hearing the seemingly silly voice of the girl with Artoria's face, Artorius's mood soured, and he made this judgment. Hearing such an evaluation, Justitiate felt uneasy. Their family's cherished wish, the Holy Grail War, was being called a boring joke. If it were anyone else, Justitiate would undoubtedly be furious, ready to argue, and even take action. But it was different when facing the legendary Dragon Emperor. As everyone knew, their ancestor was the child of Dragon Emperor Artorius, the child with his unknown concubine. Despite not being legitimate due to the lower status of the concubine and not inheriting the famous Artoria face, their Einsborn family lineage and blood were still of the highest hierarchy, recognized anywhere and anytime. Thus, as the source of their entire family's bloodline, Emperor Artorius I, the glorious ancestor, was not only their ruler but also their ancestor and the great being they passionately pursued. For the Einsborn family, their fanatical pursuit of the third magic was rooted in their reverence for this great ancestor, the European Dragon Emperor, the Holy Roman Emperor, the conqueror of barbarian tribes, and the founder of the new Roman Empire, the Holy Roman Empire. If there was anything in this world that could make the Einsborns bow their heads, freely do anything to them, and even make them serve and die without question, it was Emperor Artorius. When they summoned Emperor Artorius, they knew that they had already won this Holy Grail War. They no longer needed to compete in the Holy Grail War, nor did they have to fight with that barbaric and despicable outsider, as the embodiment of the third magic was standing before them. The great Emperor Artorius I, their esteemed ancestor, was right before their eyes. Truly, they were blessed, as they originally sought to summon heroic spirits with the scabbard Avalon to bring forth the Dragon Emperor's father, the King of Knights Arthur Pendragon. Although the legend of the King of Knights was equally appealing, and the century of unification of Britain was remarkable, it was incomparable to Emperor Artorius, akin to comparing a strengthened Philip II to the thoroughly upgraded Alexander the Great. Yes. Thus, after the initial awkwardness, Justitiate also agreed with Artorius's words. We indeed have no need to compete with those barbarians. In the time to come, everything about the Einsborn family is at your majesty's command. We shall serve at your pleasure. Chapter 114, Einsborn and Ancestor, 2. Thus, after the initial awkwardness, Justitiate also agreed with Artorius's words. We indeed have no need to compete with those barbarians. In the time to come, everything about the Einsborn family is at your majesty's command. We shall serve at your pleasure. No need to be so serious. Artorius said in a relaxed tone. This so-called Holy Grail war is nothing more than a game to me. Even if I don't intervene, my foolish sister alone could crush those ignorant fools. As if to complement Artorius's words, sounds of what seemed like a playful interaction between a girl and a little girl could be heard from downstairs. The combination of these sounds with Artorius's speech made Justitiate feel somewhat absurd. Of course, he would never oppose the words of his esteemed ancestor, but he couldn't help but ponder, the Emperor's sister, is that girl that got summoned alongside him the Holy Knight, Artoria, or the Crimson Knight, Mordred? Their bond seems to run deep, just like in the legends of historical accounts. However, Justitiate forced himself to stop thinking about it. He couldn't entertain such blasphemous thoughts. Despite the Emperor's behavior being somewhat peculiar and unconventional, he was, after all, the Emperor. How could he have any inappropriate relationship with his own sister? Besides, from observing the Emperor's interactions with the girl claiming to be a heroine, it was evident that the Emperor didn't have much fondness for her. Of course, Justitiate was unaware that the person who had accompanied Artorius and almost broke his nose in the process wasn't Artoria he knew or Mordred, but someone who identified herself as the mysterious heroine X. Anyway, you may go for now and await my orders. Artorius said, squinting his eyes and burying the back of his head in the ample bosom of the maid. I'll rest for a few days and then head to Fuyuki. Yes, your majesty. Justitiate replied. Although he had many questions to ask and much to say, Justitiate wisely sealed his lips and took his leave, watching Artorius, who seemed uninterested in engaging with him. After Justitiate left, Artorius turned around and buried his face in the maid's bosom behind him, taking deep breaths of her sweet fragrance. HMHM your majesty. After this act, the maids who had been massaging his shoulders or massaging his feet earlier gathered around, surrounding their great dragon emperor with fervor. They showed their loyalty to their magnificent emperor in their own ways. For this, Artorius had purposely adjusted his appearance to that of the cute and attractive boy he once was instead of the awe-inspiring adult he naturally was. Making himself more approachable was a simple task for Artorius, who had mastered the third magic. Now, this is what I call living a life. Artorius thought to himself. He felt engulfed in a sea of pleasant scents and softness from all directions. It was like he had ascended to heaven. Right now, he felt somewhat blissful and free after the never-ending years of worrying about being an emperor. Taking a vacation after all his hard work wasn't bad after all. At the same time. Goodbye, X. Goodbye, Ilya. The playful girl bid farewell to the adorable little girl she had just spent time with. X, seemingly in high spirits, skipped happily, her footsteps light and agile for her age, as she headed towards Artorius's room. I'm going to find Artorius now, Iri. She said joyfully to Iri. Sure, rest well, X. Iri replied with a gentle smile, addressing her new friend. This girl who claimed to be mysterious heroine X, was spirited and cute, making her very likable. Apart from Artorius, there was probably no one who wouldn't like this energetic girl. Oh, right. Iri suddenly said, as she reached out to catch Ilya, who was leaping into her arms. Something crossed her mind. At this time, Lord Ancestor might not be available to never mind. Her words were cut off midway, as the absent-minded X didn't even listen and happily ran away. I hope she won't have any psychological scars from this. Iri couldn't help but think, worried for X. After her worries, she had a little complaint for Artorius. Lord Ancestor can be quite. No, I can't be disrespectful. She shook her head vigorously, dismissing the improper thoughts. Mom. At that moment, Ilya, whom she was holding in her arms, opened her eyes wide and looked at her expectantly. Can I play with Big Sister X again tomorrow? Of course, dear. Iri smiled, responding to Ilya's question. It was clear that her daughter also liked that energetic girl very much. Omu. Getting a positive answer, Ilya beamed with happiness. As Iri turned around and entered the castle, Ilia dozed off heavily on her way back to their room. She seemed to have boundless energy during playtime but fell asleep quickly afterward, restoring her strength to continue having fun the next day. Children were such creatures. Sleeping Ilia was incredibly adorable, the kind of cuteness that even Artorius couldn't resist. Even the mage killer Emiya Kiritsugu, who always wore a perpetually gloomy expression, couldn't help but show a gentle look after seeing his daughter. Ilia. The loving wife, the adorable daughter, and their carefree life here. If he were an ordinary person, perhaps he wouldn't ask for anything more. However, larger ambitions and grand wishes kept Kiritsugu restless. Kiritsugu. Back in their room, Iri placed their daughter on the bed and then approached Kiritsugu's side. The latter was busy with a laptop that looked entirely out of place in the Einsburn castle. On it were the profiles of the masters participating in the Holy Grail War this time. Today, Ilia had a great time with X. Iri said to him, and there's nothing wrong with Lord Ancestor, Kiritsugu. Lord Ancestor. At the mention of those words, Kiritsugu's eyes lost their spark, revealing clear fluctuations in his mood. To think I summon that troop. He didn't finish his sentence, as Iri lightly tapped his back. You must show respect to Lord Ancestor. Even though Iri was unhappy with Artorius's attitude towards X, Iri still leaned towards him in her outward expressions. I'm sorry, Iri. He said so, but Kiritsugu still couldn't bring himself to respect that troublemaker, especially after seeing his carefree attitude. But, compared to the King of Knights, maybe this one isn't the worst. Kiritsugu couldn't help but ponder. The legendary ruler who established the Pendragon dynasty, which ruled 3/4 of Earth for 1500 years, and is considered the greatest ruler in history. The King of Earth and the King of Mankind, is such a card good or bad? Chapter 115, Kiritsugu's Worries. Even though he hadn't read many books, especially in sociology, humanities, history, politics, philosophy, and so on, there was no denying that Emiya Kiritsugu's ultimate wish was genuinely for humanity, and he genuinely wanted to redeem them, for justice. With such a desire in mind, he joined the Holy Grail War, viewing miracles and magic as the last resort. Perhaps this was the ordinary person's ultimate hope for the future of humanity. As the infamous mage killer, he had a rather poor compatibility with the legendary King of Knights. After all, his methods of combat were quite unorthodox. If given the choice, he would rather summon an assassin than the most powerful class, saber. Coincidentally, Artorius was summoned as an assassin. Artorius Pendragon. Whispering the name, the mage killer couldn't help but feel worried. This figure left countless legends, becoming the bread and butter for historians, novelists, and historical fiction writers. To this day, he undeniably holds the #1 spot for his influence on this world. The Dragon Emperor, with his undeniable strength, posed a problem. However, was strength alone enough to guarantee victory? Given the choice between a nuclear bomb and a machine gun, Kiritsugu would undoubtedly choose the latter. Though the former might be more potent, it was entirely beyond his control. What suited him best was, in fact, the latter, a weapon he could control. But these worries found no sympathy within the Einsburn. He believed that even if he were to speak these concerns to his wife, who appeared to be on his side, he would only receive Iri's perplexed inquiry like, "Why do you wish to control my ancestor?" From the standpoint of the Einsburn, they were descendants of Artorius and subjects of the Dragon Emperor. They should be the ones serving and pleasing the other, not the other way around, even if he was a servant summoned by them. This is getting complicated. Kiritsugu couldn't help but feel a headache coming on and was reminded of what had happened during the summoning ritual. In order to ensure victory, just like in previous Holy Grail Wars, the Einsburn had used some tricks. They had summoned their servant ahead of time. Several hours ago. Is this the right place? Ouch. Artorius, really? Shut up. After the strange mist dissipated, what appeared in the center of the summoning circle wasn't the King of Knights donning splendid armor as Kiritsugu imagined, but a stylish young girl with a baseball cap and a man clad in frost silver armor. In that moment of seeing the gorgeous man, the entire Einsburn descended into chaos and madness. The homunculus maids, who were previously believed by Kiritsugu to lack any emotions, screamed in excitement like fervent fans meeting their idol, then rushed forward, engulfing Artorius in a sea of bosoms and hips. Lord Ancestor, is it really you? Ah, the long-cherished wish of our Einsburn has come true. Lord Ancestor, I am your devoted follower. Lord Ancestor, I want to bear your child. The maids, speaking shamelessly, pushed aside Kiritsugu and even X, who cried out, "What are you doing? What will you do to my Artorius?" They tightly embraced Artorius, causing concern that the emperor might suffocate. Kiritsugu. He stared in disbelief with wide eyes at this scene and instinctively turned to look at his wife as fast as he could. Only after confirming that Iri was simply overwhelmed with emotion and teary-eyed did he breathe a sigh of relief. He was glad she didn't react like those maids. From that day on, Kiritsugu's status and existence within the Einsborn family visibly declined at a rapid pace. The entire Einsborn swiftly switched from preparing for the Holy Grail War to a mode of serving the ancestor as if Justitiate had foretold. They no longer cared about the Holy Grail War, as if they had already fulfilled their wishes. But damn it, his wish hadn't been fulfilled yet. He still wanted to use the Holy Grail to save the world. What on earth was the Einsborn playing at? Thinking about this, Kiritsugu felt a headache coming on. He finally decided. I have to rely on myself after all. No matter what happens, the Holy Grail War must go on, even without the Emperor. At the same time, pathetic weaklings dare to confront this Emperor. In the most luxurious and grandiose chamber of the hastily reconstructed Einsborn residence. On the most magnificent and conspicuous bed in the center of the chamber, Artorius looked down on the fallen maids with disdain and spoke thus. Despite being the ones who had actively seduced him, dragged him to the sleeping chamber, and given him the flirtatious big sister playing with a little boy look, what were the results? This? Based on their hair and eye colors, as well as their legends and soul resonance, Artorius had already confirmed that these Einsborn people were descendants of homunculi crafted according to Vivian's appearance. But looking at their current state, did these people only Vivian in appearance but actually Morgan inside? They were all just talk, just like Morgan, that's for sure. Seriously, all talk. The maid who screamed the loudest about bearing his child lasted a mere 3 minutes before surrendering to the awe-inspiring presence of his dragon spear. On average, the Einsborn maids lasted about 4.5 minutes, with the strongest lasting no more than 6 minutes before tearfully begging for mercy. It left Artorius feeling slightly unsatisfied. TCH, did these people really think they could toy with him just because he had a cute face? How naive. Perhaps these homunculi aren't physically strong enough yet. Though they are much stronger than those from the original story. At least I don't have to worry about their lifespans. Feeling a bit frustrated, Artorius mused, with strength and endurance both at X and agility at A++, having such exceptional parameters can be a disadvantage at times. In the future, I should focus on not just increasing the number of my harem but also their quality. With that thought, Artorius naturally turned his attention to the question, where can I find high-quality members for my harem? Just then, a dumb voice of the self-proclaimed mother called out from outside the room. Artorius, are you being a good boy? Completely carefree and treating herself as his mother without reservations, X simply pushed open the door without any regard for the lock. And then, she was hit in the face by the room full of pheromones and instantly fell down. Author's note. In this Holy Grail War, Artorius's class is assassin, though this doesn't hold much significance for him. Additionally, Artorius as a servant gains a new skill, Dragon Emperor Privilege X. The skill's effects are similar to those of Imperial Privilege. Chapter 116, True Woman of Pendragon? Artorius, are you being a good boy? Completely carefree and treating herself as his mother without reservations, X simply pushed open the door without any regard for the lock. And then, she was hit in the face by the room full of pheromones and instantly fell down. What? Seeing something she shouldn't have seen, it seemed like X had to bear a burden she couldn't handle at her age. In an instant, she transformed into an innocent maiden, her delicate, fair thighs giving way beneath her. While shouting and screaming, she unconsciously waved her hands as if trying to drive away something filthy in front of her. Then, she plopped herself down on the ground, her face turning as red as a monkey's butt. Tears welled up in her eyes. If someone who didn't know the situation saw this, they might think that Artorius had bullied her. Really useless. As Artorius said this, he snapped his fingers. Following that, a set of frost silver royal attire appeared on him, and the excessive pheromones in the air vanished. A large curtain dropped from the center of the sleeping chamber, covering several women. Some appeared to be unconscious or dazed, while others were in an AJO state, unable to even lift a finger. In truth, Artorius could have done all this without snapping his fingers, but who wouldn't do it? After completing all this, Artorius walked over to the girl who claimed to be the mysterious heroine as well as his mother. Hicks, hicks, hicks. She even started crying, really pitiful. Where did all the enthusiasm for causing mischief and attempting to eliminate Saber go? Also, was this girl only targeting the Saber class or specifically the Artoria species? If it was Saber, then perhaps someone like Caesar could be included in her target range. If it was Artoria species, she seemed to hold a great deal of resentment toward the busty Artoria, claiming them to be unforgivable. So, which was it? I have enough of this. At this point, Artorius knocked his own head. To be conflicted over such foolish things. Perhaps this self-proclaimed mother can't even figure it out herself. After all, she's supposed to be a comedy character in the world of comedy. Always causing trouble. Though he said that in his mind, watching the cute girl sitting like a duck on the ground, rubbing her eyes while sobbing, Artorius couldn't help but feel a bit restless. He kept reminding himself that this girl only resembled his mother on the surface and wasn't truly her. She was simply Artoria from a parallel world, and their connection was non-existent. But a golden-haired beauty. Incredibly powerful. Though her personality was somewhat disappointing. Somehow, she was close to Mordred, maybe even more unreliable. If Artoria hadn't gone through Merlin's rigorous teaching and hadn't been burdened with the fate and responsibility of saving Britain, would she ultimately have grown into this kind of half-hearted, disappointing girl? Considering Mordred's personality, then looking at X. And thinking about Morgan. Could it be that this disappointing girl was supposed to be the true Artoria, the true woman of the Pendragon? Were Pendragon women supposed to be like this? With this idea in mind, Artorius crouched down and offered X a handkerchief as she continued to sob. Being treated so gently, X looked at Artorius with surprise in her eyes. The reason she cried was that she felt wronged. The reason for feeling wronged wasn't just because Artorius had been playing around with the Einsburn maids in various ways, it was also due to the recent days of him neglecting her. Ever since they traveled through time to the late 20th century on Earth, Artorius had been immersed in the tender embrace of the Einsburn maids. He changed their traditional conservative maid attire into cat-eared Gothic maid outfits, and so on. Meanwhile, he treated her, his mother, like air. Although their first meeting wasn't too pleasant, X also remembered and heard the sound of Artorius's nasal bone cracking when she crashed into him. But that wasn't entirely her fault, at least not entirely. Her hip also hurt. Even though her dun stallion too had smashed his palace, it was out of motherly love. In the end, it was Artorius who sought her help, and then she came to assist. Even the usual activity of hunting down sabers was halted. Though it might not be appropriate, who could blame her? Artorius was her most beloved son. But who would have thought that this unfilial son, Artorius, would show no interest in his most beloved mother? Every time she enthusiastically wanted to play with Artorius, he ignored her. Really, just thinking about it made her feel miserable. Today, he went even further, relentlessly bullying his own mother. He showed her that horrific and NSFW scene. If he were Mordred, that rebellious child, she would have brandished her secret caliber against him without hesitation long ago. But unfortunately, it was her most beloved son who did all this. So, X couldn't do anything and had no choice but to cry. Sniff, sniff. Enough already, you're so helpless. Sniff, sniff, sniff. The more she continued, the more he was disappointed with this self-proclaimed mother figure. In the end, Artorius resisted the urge to knock her on the head and instead opened his arms, embracing her. It's all right, it's all in the past now, don't be sad, okay? Even though X always acted foolishly and was somewhat disappointing if compared to his real mother, when Artorius saw X's face, which resembled his mother's, it melted his heart. Before becoming an admirer of Scathatch, he had been an admirer of Artoria above all else, even before his reincarnation. His love for Artoria intensified, especially after his birth in this chaotic world. She had raised him with love in her own unique way, from infancy until now. Without further ado, Artorius hugged X. X. Being held in Artorius's embrace, in his cute and attractive boy form, X looked at him with a helpless expression, and instantly, her attitude softened. Truly, he is my son, with such a cute and attractive appearance, it feels like anything he does can be forgiven. Speaking of which, X wasn't very experienced when it came to love or intimacy, so she didn't have many thoughts about that. But looking at Artorius, her normal teenage reactions that were suppressed by her own foolishness unconsciously surged up, causing her heart to beat faster. This is bad, what is this feeling? I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm going to die. With this thought in mind, X instinctively wanted to hug Artorius in various ways, but of course, she couldn't actually do it. Perhaps it was a 1 in a million chance. X somehow awakened Artoria's serious factor a bit. She put on a stern face and pretended to be serious as she said to Artorius. From now on, when I talk to you, you can't pretend not to hear me. Yeah, I know. Artorius replied indifferently. Also, you can't mess around with the maids from the Einsburn anymore. I know. Artorius's attitude remained indifferent. It's just a matter of quantity over quality. After all, the maids only take about 5 minutes on average, so it doesn't really matter. He could finish the activity before X realized anything. Lastly, having made 2 conditions in one breath, the so-called Artoria's serious factor in X's mind disappeared as Artorius gently knocked her head in the next moment. I want you to join me in defeating the evil saber and Artoria species. Ow! X said these words with her head held high. Even though Artorius knocked her on the head not too hard, she immediately switched to a teary-eyed state again. Author's note. Artorius as a servant possesses a noble phantasm called Legacy of Artoria X, which grants access to the complete arsenal of the Artorius. This includes but is not limited to various types of Rongomyniad, Excalibur, and more. Chapter 117, Servant Universe. I want you to join me in defeating the evil saber and Artoria species. Ow! X said these words with her head held high. Even though Artorius knocked her on the head not too hard, she immediately switched to a teary-eyed state again. The once improving mother-son relationship took a nosedive yet again, all thanks to X's inflated ego. It was pretty obvious, right? Artorius didn't care about other sabers, but didn't his mother, Artoria, also one of the so-called Artoria species? Regardless of whether Artoria was his real mother or not, she was still a parental figure who raised him. Would he defeat his mother who raised him to please another self-proclaimed mother who came out of nowhere? Clearly, that's impossible. Besides, isn't it you who gives Artoria species the most trouble rather than the other way around? Artorius said, playfully jabbing X's temple with his fist. As he made this motion, he aged himself to almost 30 years old, transitioning from being held by X to holding her. During this process, his clothes grew along with his age. Nothing particularly exciting happened, such as torn clothes that would expose his majestic body and the like, as Artorius only wanted to teach her a lesson, not seduce her. Thus, their roles were reversed. Before, it was the big sister X holding the adorable Shota Artorius. Now, it was the dominant big brother embracing his mischievous little sister, employing a little head bump as punishment. Ouch, it hurts. Artorius, stop. As X was being treated this way, she struggled desperately and pleaded loudly for mercy. At the same time, she held on to the fantasy that someone might hear her yells and come to her rescue. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. It wasn't because she didn't yell loudly enough. It was because, after confirming that the person tormenting X was the esteemed ancestor, everyone nonchalantly shifted their attention elsewhere, whistling casually. Even Iri, who was closest to X, saw her lying in Artorius's arms with shorts and sneakers, her 2 white legs flailing, and her face all red from crying, but she simply turned and walked away without a word. Maybe Ilya would have a different response. Thinking of X as her best friend, perhaps she would assume that Artorius was bullying her and angrily shout, "Stop it, don't hit her," before rushing over to hit him with her little fists. But, unfortunately, Ilya was asleep right now. Kids tend to sleep soundly, and on top of that, Iri had set up a bounded field in her room to muffle the noise. So, all of X's potential reinforcements were gone. After yelling for a while, she could only resort to lightly tapping Artorius's arm, begging for mercy. But it was evident that Artorius didn't want to let her go so easily. Your species alone created a complete alphabet from A to Z. Is it fun to multiply yourself and run across various timelines like that? Hey, there aren't that many. Even if there's a big bunch running around, the true and final name is just X. That's me. X protested loudly after Artorius said that. Though she was clearly a comedy character, she unexpectedly held strong opinions on certain matters. Of course, after Artorius intensified the scolding, the crying and wailing of X grew even louder until she finally begged for mercy. Obviously, I will never lay a hand on Artoria species. After admonishing X, Artorius spoke without hesitation, in fact, the more Artoria species, the better. I will cherish them deeply. Just the thought of being surrounded by many Artoria of diverse personalities in the future, watching them vie for his attention and get jealous, made Artorius feel very pleased. From this point on, Artorius and X were destined to be natural enemies. However, at the same time, X seemed as though she had just discovered her child had gone astray and looked at Artorius with wide eyes, a look of disbelief on her face. What? You're saying you want to cherish Artoria species? You kid, do you even know what you're talking about? She said to Artorius with disbelief, they are like cockroaches, reproducing at a terrifying rate. If you encounter one, you can expect at least 8 more lurking nearby. Seemingly oblivious to the fact that she had insulted herself too, she continued, anyway, I will absolutely not give up. I'm sorry, I was wrong, please forgive me. Before she could finish her words, Artorius punished X once again, causing her to cry and kick her legs in frustration. She continued to do so until she was completely exhausted, and then, with a face of despair and happiness, she collapsed into his embrace. Why are there so many Artorius across the multiverse, as long as I'm the only? Mumbling such words, X fell into a deep sleep. What a silly mother! Artorius shook his head in frustration. Talking about Artoria species being the cancer of the universe and all that. Nah, maybe this servant universe is just stuck with this kind of idiotic setting? Do I really need to worry about Artoria species invading after I conquer this world? He forcibly pushed away that absurd thought. However, his curiosity about the servant universe was now accompanied by some concerns. In the original FGO game, the servant universe was mostly for comedic purposes. It seemed like it didn't require much thought. But if one delved into it, one would realize how powerful those universes' servants were. In the background setting, there were descriptions like one person destroying an entire planet everywhere so casually. For someone like X, a comedic mother who could break through space barriers with her spaceship and then cause havoc to Artorius' world, it wasn't a problem. But if it were someone else, someone evil and troublesome from that universe, it would probably be as significant as the destruction of human history or human order incineration. In the first place, why did she suddenly appear? Did she hear my nonsense prayer? I was just joking and said that casually about before. What's more, she also regards me as her son. My head hurts with all this bullshit. Whatever, I'm just here for a vacation. After all those tiring wars and empire building, I don't want to think this complicated thing. And my plan has just begun. I haven't even unified all the continents on this tiny little sphere, and now I have to shoulder galactic-level opponents? Isn't that too much of a stretch? Looking at X sleeping sweetly in his bed, Artorius couldn't help but sigh. I'm the only saber in the whole world. I'll kill all sabers in Artoria species. In her dreams, X spoke such dreadful words, making Artorius feel heavy-hearted. Is it true that beneath the surface of comedy lies a dark and terrifying reality? Like a dark joke. And then, Artorius will belong to me alone, hee. Retracting his previous thoughts. X was indeed just a comedy character. The great dragon emperor Artorius rubbed his forehead and felt like he must have been drunk or gone crazy. He stood up and roughly threw X onto his bed. X loved cuddling with anything in her sleep. Without Artorius in her embrace anymore, her breathing difficulties started giving her nightmares, causing her to emit pleading groans. The mates of the Einsborn quickly misunderstood, thinking she was engaged in some wild activity. Perhaps she was dreaming of her beloved son being taken away by other Artoria species, causing her frustration and rage. Regardless, Artorius had no desire to bother with her any longer. He wanted all the information about the servant universe, especially its technology, and of course, X. In short, he wanted everything. But for now, he needed to settle his mind and make her so-called comediness less prominent. With this thought in mind, Artorius made his way to the room of his justice-obsessed partner. Master, it's time for us to have a serious conversation. Chapter 118, Trust of Master and Servant. A few minutes later, after handling X. Sniper rifles, automatic rifles, submachine guns, various types of grenades, Kevlar bulletproof jackets. I see. I'm starting to get why they called you the Mage Killer. In Kiritsugu's room, Artorius grinned and commented while watching his justice-obsessed partner busily organizing his weapons and equipment. Sitting across from Artorius, Kiritsugu, after bowing in respect, fell into silence and didn't say a word. He wore an expression that seemed lost, as if he hadn't quite grasped Artorius's words. If Jubstitiate were here at this moment, perhaps he would have a better understanding. Having experienced one Holy Grail war and witnessed other servants, he would undoubtedly be amazed by Artorius's vast knowledge. Although the Holy Grail system provided servants with modern knowledge, it only taught them what these things are and how to use them, without explaining the underlying principles. It was a case of knowing the result but not the reason or process. Just like in the original story where Artoria once said, "I'm good at riding, so I can drive." Which amused Iri. It felt similar to the African tribal uncle with an automatic rifle. They knew what a gun was and how to use it, but they treated it more as a mysterious artifact than a mechanical creation. They believed that the accuracy of firearms depended more on prayers and beliefs than aiming and training. Artorius was different. He genuinely knew about these things and knew how to use them, even understanding the underlying principles. His way of thinking was not ancient, it was modern. That was the biggest difference between him and the other participating servants. At the same time, it was a small flaw deliberately shown by Artorius to test Kiritsugu. He was testing whether this future counter-force guardian was reliable. Despite being somewhat lacking in spiritual and mental aspects, Kiritsugu was at least commendable and somewhat competent. Expanding the intelligence network controlled by the Einsborn while on vacation seemed like a good idea. However, Kiritsugu. So, are you ready to go to Fuyuki City and win the Holy Grail War? Kiritsugu. What's your plan? What tactics will you use? And the intelligence gathering? Kiritsugu. Artorius asked several questions in succession, bringing up several topics. However, the Mage Killer only lowered his head, silently resisting and protesting. This made Artorius furrow his brow. Kiritsugu. Seeing this scene unfold, Iri, who was by their side, opened her mouth, intending to say something to ease the tension. But before that, Your Majesty. Kiritsugu finally spoke up. Before that, may I ask you a question? Kiritsugu. Iri was confused. Of course, you can. Although Artorius's opinion of this man had diminished, he maintained a smile on his face. You're the son-in-law of the Einsborn family, and Iri is like my child. Just like her, you can call me ancestor. Although Artorius had a gentle smile and sincere eyes, Kiritsugu still felt that the guy across from him was taking advantage of him. Even though you are a figure from 15 centuries ago, it doesn't mean you've truly lived for 1500 years. As a servant, you only represent one aspect of the heroic spirit. The way you're reacting now should reflect how the Dragon Emperor was when he was around 20. However. Yes, Lord Ancestor. After contemplating, in the end, Kiritsugu gave in. My question is simple, what wish do you want to fulfill with the Holy Grail? Every servant summoned by the Holy Grail had a wish they wanted to realize. At least that was the case with most servants. This was what Kiritsugu wanted to know. He hoped to use this to investigate the true potential of this trump card of trump cards in his hand. Whether he could be trusted and used. As for Artorius's initial claim of "I'm here on vacation" and the decadent lifestyle he led in the Einsborn castle, Kiritsugu saw it as a facade. He knew better. Though he hadn't even finished middle school, he still took the time to study the Pendragon dynasty history thoroughly in preparation for summoning the King of Knights. From the first head and starting point of the Pendragon dynasty, old King Uther, until the current Earth Federation's nominal head, Artorius LXXV. This meticulous and serious mage killer had studied them all. T/N, LXXV in Roman numerals means 75. Among them, the most significant figure was the first emperor of the empire, Artorius I. In history, he was renowned for his diligent governance and love for the people. He reviewed over 3 million letters and documents every day, worked for more than 18 hours each day, and persisted until he was 120 years old. Such a hard-working and dedicated individual was hard to compare with the current lecherous brat who seemed to have sunk into a pool of cosmetics. He bore some resemblance to Artorius XXXVII or Artorius XLIV, those debauched and indulgent rulers. T/N, 37 and 44. Could it be a summoning error, and I ended up summoning one of those two? But that doesn't seem right. This servant's strength and characteristics make it unlikely for him to be an incompetent ruler, right? Little did Kiritsugu know that from Artorius II to Artorius LXXV, they were all just disguised puppets of the figure before him. Despite his initial impression and ingrained prejudices, he couldn't help but wonder if his preconceived notions were indeed accurate. With earnest curiosity, Kiritsugu gazed at Artorius, awaiting his response. The mutual trust and cooperation between a servant and master are crucial. Artorius thought to himself. He originally believed Kiritsugu could get along better with him than with Artoria in the original story of Fate/Zero, but it seemed that the situation was even worse. It seems I won't put your mind at ease unless I clarify things a bit, Kiritsugu. Artorius spoke with ease. I need the Holy Grail to achieve a certain goal for the Empire. As he said that, a chilling light flickered in Artorius's eyes like frost. As for what it specifically entails, you'll naturally be informed once your confidentiality clearance reaches the level of a governor. Is this enough to put your mind at ease, Kiritsugu? Chapter 119, Power of the Modern Empire, I. A bonus chapter for every 1k power stones, thanks for the support. It seems I won't put your mind at ease unless I clarify things a bit, Kiritsugu. Artorius spoke with ease. I need the Holy Grail to achieve a certain goal for the Empire. As he said that, a chilling light flickered in Artorius's eyes like frost. As for what it specifically entails, you'll naturally be informed once your confidentiality clearance reaches the level of a governor. Is this enough to put your mind at ease, Kiritsugu? As Artorius spoke, Kiritsugu's heart rate suddenly accelerated by 2 beats. He felt like he had just stumbled upon a deadly secret. He even felt a twinge of regret. The Empire's goal. Is he talking about the goal from his era, or is he referring to the current Empire? Could it be that I'm involved in some plot on the Empire's level? Is this Emperor connected to the present Empire as well? That's not easy to deny, considering the Einsborn's loyalty and fanaticism towards this Emperor. It doesn't seem difficult for him to appear and make the entire world submit to him. If that's the case, will I become a threat and need to be silenced? Though he was an ally of justice, a mercenary akin to a demon of slaughter, and a famous mage killer, Kiritsugu knew that he wouldn't stand a chance against the might of the government, especially when dealing with colossal entities like the Earth Federation or the so-called World Empire. He possessed an RPG, but they had F-55 sky fighters. And as someone who worked on the mystery side and was involved in various matters, he knew much more. To the outside world, the F-55 sky fighters, the 2-million-ton floating island fortress, and the 300-ton class land destroyers constituted the pinnacle of the Empire's armaments. But, as the famous mage killer, Kiritsugu knew the might that the Empire concealed beneath the surface far surpassed these surface armaments, which were constantly berated by the opposition as wasting taxpayers' money like frogs croaking. The crucial difference lay in one side's use of mystery, while the other did not. The combination of science and magecraft produced unparalleled results. Kiritsugu understood this all too well. Compared to the Empire's terror, violence, military might, and armaments, his own abilities seemed minuscule, like insects or trash, entirely insignificant. In his previous encounters with the Empire during missions, the results were far from ideal. The most memorable one was a battle on the snowy plains of Canada. The Empire's internal security forces, known as the Final Brigade, launched an attack on the remnants of the dead apostles. Kiritsugu got involved unwittingly. Their actions were not directed at him specifically, they were just collateral damage. But it left him with a sense of despair, a feeling of being utterly powerless. Fighter jets in the sky, swarms of unmanned drones, and orbital strike devices. On the ground, Imperial soldiers donning the 4th-generation Frost-Silver exoskeletons, the 6th-generation Knights of the Round Table anti-gravity infantry vehicles, and the 7th-generation Radiant anti-gravity main battle tanks. Supporting all of those were the Dragon Emperor control systems, the Eternal Guardian monitoring systems, and the pervasive electronic and spiritron networks covering the battlefield. It was an all-encompassing, three-dimensional system perfectly blending science and magecraft. Under the combined attacks of this entire system, even the dead apostles, some of whom were as powerful as the ancestors, were massacred, crushed, and overwhelmed like innocent lambs. Their arrogant pride, believing themselves superior to humans, was crushed into dust by cold metal and searing spiritron. All the terrifying abilities they thought could dominate everything, their undying power, their dreadfully powerful magecraft, magic swords or beasts, everything vanished under the might of the Empire's military system. In the end, only a handful of mentally broken dead apostles were captured. Waiting for them were lives as experimental subjects in Empire laboratories, a life without seeing daylight, and an end after being squeezed of all value. At that time, Kiritsugu had lost all hope. It wasn't something humans could fight against. Not even one mage killer, let alone a million mage killers, would be of any use. Yet, against all odds, he managed to survive. What kept him alive wasn't his abilities, strength, intelligence, or origin bullets power. It was the Empire's control system's ability to recognize friends from foes. The soldiers, knights, and fighter jets of the Empire simply ignored him. The Empire's firepower was intense, yet not a single bullet hit him. All the weapons, armies, and tanks passed through him as if he were a rock, a wisp of air, or simply nothing. The mage killer had his life spared. After that incident, he avoided any tasks related to the Empire, until today, when Artorius's words reminded him of the humiliation of being dominated by the nation's machinery and the fear of being subjugated by unparalleled violence. So, let's get along well, master. After saying these words, Artorius smiled, patted him on the shoulder, and then turned and left. Deep breath. After Artorius left, Kiritsugu took a deep breath. His mind was spinning, his body felt weak, and he almost fell to the ground. Kiritsugu. Noticing that her husband was not well, Iri hurriedly stepped forward and reached out to support him. Are you all right? No, it's nothing. Kiritsugu forced a very faint smile. I'm just a little tired. At the same time, Artorius pushed open Ilya's bedroom door. Though as a young lady of the Einsburn family, Ilya's room was guarded by maids, with various security measures in place, none of these security measures would be used on Artorius, no matter what. The maid on duty blushed slightly upon seeing Artorius and then bowed, making way for him. I remember you. Artorius did stop and said, Sella. Why yes, your majesty. The maid stuttered, being acknowledged by Artorius with her name seemed like quite an honor. Though it didn't compare to being held by him. Nonetheless, after hesitating for a moment, she continued, Your majesty, that Miss Ilya has already gone to bed, so, Ah, of course, I'm not trying to stop you, but I just wanted to inquire so that I could better serve you. Haha. Seeing the somewhat flustered explanation from the maid, Artorius chuckled merrily and reassured her, Don't worry, I won't do anything to Ilya. After all, she's like my own child. As he spoke, Artorius walked into the bedroom, approaching Ilya's small bed and gazing at the adorable sleeping girl. Long eyelashes, even breathing, and a bit of baby fat on her face, none of these things were of great importance. Even the highest level magic circuits in Artorius's eyes hardly hold up any significance compared to the magical energy she possessed. Einsburn, the pinnacle of homunculus technology. Artorius let out a sigh and said to himself as he gazed at the sleeping Ilya. Technology has progressed to this level. Chapter 120, Power of the Modern Empire, 2. Einsburn, the pinnacle of homunculus technology. Artorius let out a sigh and said to himself as he gazed at the sleeping Ilya. Technology has progressed to this level. Artorius looked at the sleeping Ilya with a tender gaze. Sitting by her bedside, he held her hand. Truly, she was like his own flesh and blood. Closer than any of the maids here, it felt akin to the affection he had for Iri, like a level of closeness one has with a daughter. Indeed, we used homunculus technology. However, it has undergone significant improvements and enhancements. As he caressed Ilya's soft little hand, Artorius thought to himself. A perfect holy grail, hey. Not like the one in the original story, but even more perfect, with advanced technology. If used purely for magecraft, he could easily earn a top position in the Mages Association, of course, referring to the one from the original story, and most likely, he would get a ceiling designation. In my timeline, after 1500 years of development, how different is the world? How far have we come in preparing for the counter-forces resistance? What mysteries, magecraft, and technology have developed in this time? And how have I spent these 1500 years? Artorius was very curious. Though he had always told himself that he was here on vacation and didn't belong to this era, that he would return home after the Holy Grail War, celebrating with Morgan, Vivian, and Mordred, and, if he could work harder, have Scathatch and Artoria join in, that would be even better. But he couldn't help but feel extremely curious. Unlike the summoned heroic spirits, who seek historical records of themselves in libraries and other sources after being summoned, Artorius was torn between delving into his curiosity or leaving it be. The only things that made him happy were few. First, the dynasty he founded continues to this day. Even though during the time of Artorius LXX, he had gracefully relinquished power to follow the trend of the times and established a constitutional monarchy. T/N, Artorius 70th. Yet, in reality, he still wielded immense power and economic influence. Not to mention, on the mystery side, he was likely still the Dragon Emperor with the ability to command winds and rains. Secondly, at this point in time in this world, he couldn't sense the presence of himself. Artorius had read the news and had seen his supposed descendants, the 75th in line, who was theoretically his heir but in reality nothing more than a puppet created through the third magic. Is my existence unique in the timeline? Did the other me hide away and refuse to meet myself? Or perhaps, something went wrong with this version of myself in this timeline. In any case, not having to deal with the awkwardness of meeting another version of himself made Artorius feel somewhat relieved. Having a group of Artoria surrounding him was one thing, but having a group of himself surrounding him was an entirely different matter. In this regard, Artorius felt a bit biased and hypocritical. Realizing this, he felt a bit sorry for X. If another version of himself appeared before him, he would likely want to defeat them as well. It was only human nature. Due to these concerns, Artorius didn't make a big fuss about collecting information and history from this time period. Instead, he tried to find out indirectly and casually. For example, the condition of Ilia, Iri, and the Einsborn. As a branch family of the Pendragon, the Einsborn held considerable prestige and reputation in Germany and even across Western Europe. They were not like the reclusive mage family portrayed in the original story. Based on their technology, magecraft, and military capabilities, Artorius could make a rough estimate of his doubts. His conclusion was: they should be doing well. At least they haven't failed and are still advancing. So, they should be fine. Feeling slightly relieved, he shifted his mindset from worry to leisure. He intended to let go of Ilia's hand and find some amusement. That maid guarding the door, named Sela, was quite cute. She would do. With such thoughts in mind, Artorius let go of Ilia's hand, only to quickly grab Sela's. Your Majesty, this isn't quite appropriate. What's wrong with it? At least change the location. If Miss Ilia sees this, then... Don't worry, Ilia is sleeping soundly, so... Yeah. MMHH. Ah. For several minutes, the energetic homunculus maid polished the Dragon Emperor's mighty spear, which consumed a great deal of her strength. Afterward, Sela picked up her dress, gazing with resentment at the departing figure of her ancestor, who was already humming a tune so casually. At the same time, she noticed a sound behind her. Startled, she immediately turned around and found Ilia still with her eyes closed. Still concerned, she cautiously approached and confirmed that Ilia was still asleep, which relieved her. As she walked towards the adjacent bathroom, Sela muttered to herself, that was close. As Ilia's personal caretaker, she had her own small bed in Ilia's room and the privilege to use the bathroom there. Thankfully, that was the case because after Ilia woke up, she only smelled the refreshing scent of bath products and shampoo from Sela, along with a hint of air freshener in the room. As for Sela's outfit, there was no change whatsoever. It was a standard maid outfit, not as conservative as in the original story, nor as edgy as the Gothic style. As a young child, Ilia didn't dwell too much on these matters. She rubbed her eyes and greeted Sela with a sleepy tone before the maid took her to freshen up. Later on, Ilia was led groggily to the dining table. The Einsborn family's breakfast table was livelier than usual due to the presence of the summoned servants. Good morning, Lord Ancestor, Big Sister X. Good morning, Mom, Dad, Lies Rit. As Ilia greeted everyone politely, X was busy eating. Her appetite was as expected as one of Artoria species, with practically no limits. At the same time, Artorius looked at X with a helpless gaze, much like one would look at their childish little sister, even though she kept insisting that she was his mother. Addressed as Mom and Dad by Ilia were obviously referring to Iri and Kiritsugu. The former gazed at X with warmth, while the latter still had the appearance of a man holding a grudge. Only when Ilia entered the room did he manage to force a smile. Chapter 121, Trip to Japan. At the same time, Artorius looked at X with a helpless gaze, much like one would look at their childish little sister, even though she kept insisting that she was his mother. Addressed as Mom and Dad by Ilya were obviously referring to Iri and Kiritsugu. The former gazed at X with warmth, while the latter still had the appearance of a man holding a grudge. Only when Ilya entered the room did he manage to force a smile. "Get the plane ready." Having arrived slightly ahead of Iri to hand a napkin to X to wipe the corners of her mouth, Artorius calmly gave instructions. "It's about time we head to Japan." "So soon?" Iri seemed slightly surprised and a little nervous. "For the Holy Grail War, we still need some time to prepare. First, let's meet the masters there." Artorius's tone remained relaxed. "Then we can take a little detour. Kyoto, Mount Fuji, Hot Spring Hotel, and all that. Isn't that nice?" "Iri, you've never been outside the castle since you were born, have you? So, let's make it a family trip. We'll need about 5 planes for that." Iri widened her eyes in disbelief. 5 planes? "Yes." Artorius continued, 5 should do." Iri remained silent for a moment, showing a puzzled expression. On the other hand, Kiritsugu, being quicker to grasp Artorius's intentions, had already understood he wanted to bring all of the Einsborn's homunculi, or at least those associated with him, to Japan. "That's impossible." With this realization, Kiritsugu vehemently opposed, "Fuyuki will soon become a battlefield." "You? Who said I'm going to Fuyuki?" Artorius frowned, interrupting Kiritsugu's words. "What tourist attractions does Fuyuki have?" Kiritsugu: "I want to go to Tokyo, Kyoto, or any place where we can have fun." "What are you saying, Kiritsugu? Have you forgotten that I came here just for a vacation?" Kiritsugu was on the verge of losing his temper. Yesterday, Artorius had mentioned carrying a significant secret and bearing a certain goal of the empire. Yet today, he changed his tune. It's just that Kiritsugu couldn't beat him. Otherwise. "Do you have any objections, Kiritsugu?" "No." Though, in reality, Kiritsugu's smile became even more bitter. What's so special about Japan? At the same time, X, who was struggling to swallow a large piece of meat, looked up at Artorius with a curious expression. Next to her, Ilya looked at X with astonishment, then glanced down at the tiny piece of beef on her own fork. Then she looked up again. The piece of meat X just swallowed seemed about 20 times larger than what was on her fork. How did X manage to do that? It was like a cartoon special effect. Of course, Artorius knew what X meant by that question. It wasn't about the scenery or any cultural or natural landmarks in Japan. Nor was she asking about the best place to have fun. She was simply asking him about the delicious food there. Although not at the very top, Japanese cuisine has its own unique qualities. Artorius calmly explained. Various seafood and meats with a preference for subtle flavors. They have also adopted and modified some foreign dishes like curry rice, fried rice, sukiyaki, and others. After explaining, Artorius flashed a gentle smile and gave X gentle head pats. As he continued to head patting X, her ahogue wiggled happily, much like a dog's wagging tail. She gleefully gulped down saliva, lost in a daydream of savoring a Japanese cuisine feast, her eyes sparkling with delight. "It's really great that every Artoria is all glutton," Artorius said in his mind as he watched the childish face of X. Meanwhile, Kiritsugu felt an unexplained irritation and reached for a cigarette. However, he remembered where he was and resisted the urge. And so, the entire Einsborn family decided to embark on a trip to Japan. With only a few staff members remaining behind, all male, the rest of the Einsborn quickly arranged their flights with the airlines. They excitedly gathered around the great emperor to head to Berlin. Their flight was scheduled to depart from Berlin Airport, with a layover in Hebei province before finally landing at Tokyo International Airport. For the Einsborn, accomplishing such a task was straightforward. Financially, they lacked nothing, thanks to the Das Rheingold, a magical treasure in their possession. They could afford anything, even an aircraft carrier provided someone was willing to offer it to them. Serving the ancestors was a matter of propriety and thoughtfulness. However, the number of planes procured differed from Artorius's original plans. The latest model, a giant airplane with a takeoff weight of 10,000 tons, was urgently purchased. This airplane, featuring 3 levels of cabins, a swimming pool, an entertainment room, and an ultra-large soft bed, a new private plane that became Artorius's newest toy. It allowed him to chat with the Einsborn women and bond with them while overlooking the sea of clouds at an altitude of 5 kilometers. Even Artorius had to admit that Jubstashiat had done a good job. Back in the days of Camelot, Artorius had encountered many things. However, he had never come across a toy like this. Technological advancements are truly remarkable, as they have the power to transform the way humans live. As a result, everyone, except for a certain someone who remained confined in the smoking room, was in high spirits. X and Ilya leaned against the window, exclaiming in admiration at the blue skies and white clouds below. Iri looked at them with a gentle smile. The rest of the Einsborn maids took turns attending to the Emperor's sleeping quarters, with the automated airplane flying smoothly all the way to Tokyo, filled with laughter and joy. Chapter 122, Mission. Meanwhile, as Artorius and his group were on the way to Tokyo. In the city of Orleans, it was located beneath the city, but it did not exist in the surface world. Instead, it was an island that had been established as a secret realm. This place, designated to imitate Avalon and an essential base for the Empire's mystery affairs, featured a floating apple-shaped island within the reverse side of the world. In the heart of this island stood a vast expanse of Gothic architecture, combining elements of both classical and modern, machinery and magical, spanning 3 million square kilometers. Here, over 15 million beings pledged allegiance to His Majesty, the Holy and the Great Emperor Artorius I, the First, including humans, fairies, dragons, other phantasmal species, and beings known as servants. Furthermore, the island housed the Imperial Illuminati Council Hall, 52 imperial research institutions, and an organization known as the Imperial Mystery Bureau. This bureau's building was designed like two intersecting long swords, symbolizing the Sword of Promised Victory Excalibur and the Imperial Sword of Frost Emperor Clarent. Such structures with strong political and even religious significance, displaying similarities to this design, could be found across the world due to the Empire's high favor towards these two swords. 10:30 in the morning. The artificial sun's rays shine through the glass windows, casting light into the bureau building. In the office room of the head of the intelligence department, there sits a man dressed in black military attire. This man had assumed many identities over the years, living through numerous centuries and accomplishing countless extraordinary deeds. He was an exceptionally legendary figure in the history of the Empire. Frankly speaking, if he were to perish right at this moment, he would undoubtedly be qualified to contend for the class of assassin, provided he consented to join the throne of heroes. According to the historical records of the observable world, this man passed away in the year 557 AD. However, that was merely a deception used to maintain the integrity of proper human history. Apart from his hair, every other part of the man's body remained young and active to this day. He had dedicated himself wholeheartedly to the Pendragon dynasty's dominance, the Empire, and above all, for the sake of humanity until he lost his hair. Due to his capabilities and loyalty, he naturally held the position of the head intelligence officer of the Empire, overseeing a total of 4 intelligence organizations. This included the Intelligence Department, which belonged to the Imperial Mystery Bureau. At first glance, this department seemed quite ordinary, just a department within a larger organization. However, one could not judge it merely on its surface. The one who once led the Military Operations Department could attest to how troublesome this organization could be. The personnel recruited here were the cream of the crop, the elites among the elites, the finest of the Empire's army. With substantial funding, top-notch resources, and equipment, their combat prowess was exceptionally formidable. Compared to the ceiling designation enforcers of a certain mages association on a particular timeline, the difference was as vast as that between heaven and earth. It might even be greater. Moreover, due to the direct name of this organization, countless heroes and brave souls from the reverse side met their ends over the 800 years since its establishment. It always started like this. Who the heck are you? Who do you think you are, acting all high and mighty here as a mere department head? Even if the Dragon Emperor himself comes, I'd only give him 3 points of respect, just pretending, and yet you dare to act all cool in front of me. I could easily chop you to pieces. That was the basic logic, acting like typical Chinese young masters. Afterward, lawless fanatics, mainly dead apostles and rogue mages experienced the weight of justice's hammer. The ugly men and women died on the spot, while the good-looking ones were captured, their fate determined by the Dragon Emperor's wishes. This legendary figure of the intelligence organization, known as the Second Man of the Empire, had been involved in such affairs not just once or twice. Out of 10 missions, 8 were enough to satisfy the Dragon Emperor. However, this time, this mission wasn't about beating up weak rogue mages and dead apostles who could barely put up a fight. It wasn't even about dealing with beasts known as humanity's enemies or extinction threats from alien beings within the Earth's atmosphere. It was, to fulfill the Emperor's pleasure and vacation desires. Always causing trouble, muttered the man as he closed the latest report on the Holy Grail War displayed on his screen. Yes, His Majesty did mention it. He murmured to himself. Not long after defeating the fake Emperor Lucius, a drifter phenomenon occurred. It made him join the Fourth Holy Grail War as a servant. Amid his contemplation, the Spiritron device next to his office desk chimed with a sweet electronic tone, indicating an incoming message. An electronic voice from the device reminded him, "The person you summoned, a member of the Imperial Mystery Guards, Major Bazet Frogamakramitz, is waiting outside the door. Let her in." The man nodded and issued the command. "Yes, sir." Soon, the automatic door of the office opened, revealing a young major with wine-red short hair, a crisp military uniform with shining epaulets, and perfectly groomed hair. At the age of 23, she was a promising elite of the Empire. Stepping into the office, she tapped her bootheels together and saluted the man, saying, "Major Bazet reporting to you, sir." "Mm." The man replied expressionlessly and continued, "Major Bazet, I've reviewed your resume. Even among the elite of the intelligence department, you are one of the best. Thank you for your praise, sir." With her hand covered in white gloves placed behind her back, she stood straight in her military uniform, without hesitation in her response. "Currently, the Empire has a challenging task for you." The man activated the switch, and a holographic display screen appeared in front of Bazet, showing a photo of Artorius. "Who is this?" Though she had never seen Artorius, his distinctive appearance was undeniable, the best proof of his identity even in this world. Artorius's features were more telling than the Habsburg jawline about his true identity. "A royalty?" "Yes." The man replied with a tranquil expression. "Regarding this, you need not concern yourself too much. Just know that he is your target for the upcoming mission. You are to closely monitor his activities for the foreseeable future, regardless of the circumstances. Monitor and protect His Highness Pendragon?" "Understood, sir." "Protect?" "Not quite." As Bazet stood tall, trying to express her determination to face any danger to ensure the safety of her target, the man shook his head, a smirk forming on his lips, more pleased than sarcastic. From that expression, it was evident that spending time with the Emperor had rubbed off on the man in more ways than one. "What you are tasked with is to satisfy his every wish and happiness at any cost." Sir, I'm a little confused." "Confused?" Seeing the bewildered expression on Bazet's face, the man maintained his pleasant smile. "Let me be more direct then. Major Bazet, your mission is to..." Chapter 123, The Blessing and Curses of Immortality. Watching the figure storm away in anger, yet unable to unleash her own frustration, the man continued to wear a smile. With a snap of his fingers, a fully autonomous Spiritron network served up a cup of coffee. It was an impossibly concentrated brew, less of a coffee beverage and more of a semi-solid, viscous substance. It was loaded with excessive coffee grounds and excessive sugar, followed by a generous dollop of butter and cream. After taking a sip, a strong blend of sweetness and the unique bitterness of coffee surged into his brain, prompting a satisfied "ah." It had been 15 centuries. He, Agravain, had lived for 15 centuries in a human body. In the face of time, even steel would rust. Those once his comrade, the Knights of the Round Table, were now but a few remnants. Some perished on battlefields akin to hell, sacrificing themselves for humanity's future. Others fared even worse, with their spirits and souls pushed to their limits. For 15 centuries, it meant nothing to phantasmal species, nor to the other supernatural species. However, for humans, it was an undeniably prolonged journey. "Youth, it's truly a blessing." Continuing to observe Bazet, who left with a sulking demeanor, he genuinely sighed. The fallen warriors, the Knights of the Round Table driven to their limits, would return to the throne of Empire, where they would be cleansed, nurtured and repaired until they were fully restored before being reincarnated into new bodies to continue fighting for the Empire. Yet, for safety and for their own well-being, the process of nurturing their souls also involved stripping away their memories. The newly born infants were like blank slates, seen not as reborn but as reincarnated. Unless absolutely necessary, Agravain didn't want to resort to such means. 15 centuries had burdened him with infinite responsibilities and unending karma. Yet, it had also granted him countless beautiful and tender memories that were hard to let go of. His loyalty to the empire. His fanaticism towards the emperor. The camaraderie among his subordinates and colleagues. The intense hatred and enmity toward his enemies. The anticipation and concern for humanity's future, and even love. Yes, even someone like him had experienced love. Not just once, but more than once. It's just that none of those stories ended well. His first wife was an ordinary-looking but exceptionally gentle woman. Initially assigned by the empire to take care of his daily life, she eventually became his partner, his wife. For Agravain, those were the most heartwarming and blissful days. Every day, he returned home exhausted, only to be healed by her tenderness and kindness. She passed away at the age of 230. Prior to that, she had already fallen into madness due to the increasing mental strain she couldn't endure. Even worse, Agravain, who was busy with work, hadn't noticed her condition at all. She had endured it all silently. Even until her death, during those brief moments of sanity, she apologized to him tearfully. She believed she was responsible for Agravain. "What would you do without me, Agravain?" Thinking of this, Agravain clenched his fists. In the end, he proved much stronger than she thought. The day after her funeral, he returned to his post at work. All those who made outstanding contributions to the empire and humanity would have their souls retrieved by the throne of empire. They would receive a brand new, superior body, and more beautiful life as if they had secured an excellent seat in the cycle of reincarnation. Of course, this system was not without flaws. The biggest ethical and moral issue arose when it came to how their loved ones from their previous life should be treated in the next. The empire's approach was management. All records would be sealed and periodically destroyed. The officials responsible for the reincarnation process would undergo regular brainwashing to forget it all. In theory, no one, not even the emperor himself, could inquire about or be aware of these matters. But this couldn't deter the empire's most exceptional intelligence officer. Agravain found a loophole and discovered information about his wife's reincarnation. This privilege, knowing her fate, helped him endure 10 unbearable months. And after that, he waited for 2 more years until he chanced upon her again. Naturally, the child didn't remember him at all. Under the protection of her parents, she grew up happily, enjoying the bliss that a human child should. Basking in the sunlight, Agravain watched for a while before decisively turning away. Behind him, he faintly heard the children's conversation. Her playmates, kids of similar age, watched him with fear, caution, and worry, advising her not to approach or look at the adult. "Don't provoke that man, he'll take you away." Oh! Despite subconsciously feeling curious, sad, and warm, the child eventually heeded her playmates' advice and returned to the game. Perhaps tonight, she would have a hazy and vague dream. Perhaps by tomorrow, she would forget all about this. Either way, there was no longer a direct and close connection between her and him. "That's human nature, Sir Agravain. I can understand and forgive you, but only this once," the emperor said with a tone that was somewhat resigned yet unwavering when he learned about the matter, admonishing the Iron Knight. He didn't disappoint the emperor either. Just like his second love story. Unlike the first one, which was plain and prolonged, the second love story was quite thrilling and interesting from an ordinary person's perspective. Firstly, the woman wasn't a human. She was a vampire, or more precisely, a dead apostle. Although her appearance was far more beautiful than that of an ordinary woman, Agravain could never fall in love with such an inhuman creature, not unless he went insane. Just like how he still considered Artorius's affair with Morganastane in the endless glory of the Dragon Emperor. The story begins with a small segment of the long war between the Empire and the vampires. At that time, the Empire's strength wasn't as formidable as it is now. However, thanks to the help of the counterforce, the power of the vampires was even stronger than it was in the original history. Even though the Dragon Emperor was by no means inferior to the King of the Moon, Crimson Moon, in terms of top-tier combat power, the Empire's overall strength was slightly inferior to the enhanced vampires. The Empire was slightly at a disadvantage in the ongoing wars. Every victory came with an extraordinary level of difficulty. Even if they managed to kill all those vampires, it wouldn't take long for the dead, like a malignant disease, to replenish their numbers. The war seemed endless. T/N, the dead apostles' familiars. The arrogant vampire Duchess was Agravain's old nemesis. Like all arch-enemies, they had countless clashes, battles, and life and death struggles, and through these battles, they developed peculiar emotions. Love. The vampire duchess fell in love with Agravain, wanting to make him her partner. After the Iron Knight refused her outright, she settled for a compromise, asking him to run away with her and leave the war behind. Agravain felt astonished and skeptical. After all, he was never the kind of popular man that got pursued by a woman. "I'm tired," the Duchess said wearily. "I'm tired of everything, the war, the madness, and the corruption of the vampires. I just want to leave this place now. Go somewhere where no one can find us and live a peaceful life. Don't you feel the same, Agravain? Aren't you tired of your emperor, your empire, their boundless ambition and desire?" "Of course not." Agravain sneered in his mind, knowing that the corrupted vampire could never understand the loyalty of a knight. But on the surface, he pretended to be conflicted, drawing the vampire closer. Several months later, Agravain used this emotion to his advantage. He set up a trap and captured the Duchess. Ignoring her shocked and sorrowful eyes, he imprisoned her, interrogated her, tortured her. He used magecraft and drugs to tame and turn her into his spy. Then, he sent her back to the vampire's side as his spy. With insider information and intelligence, the Empire achieved several victories, which pleased Agravain. Until her identity as a spy was exposed. What happened next was as expected. The last words of the Duchess were, "I never betrayed you." She looked at Agravain expectantly until he nodded and replied, "I know." Only then did she take her final breath. For the next 600 years, Agravain drowned himself in work. He encountered wonderful women along the way, but his heart remained unmoved. The immortality bestowed upon us by His Majesty is both a blessing and a curse, a reward and a punishment, and more importantly, a trial. Thinking this, Agravain opened his eyes again. With the assistance of his self-customized mystic code called Will of Steel, his strength, stamina, and willpower were restored to their peak. "I must continue to work. Purging the empire of internal pests, crushing enemies and competitors, and most importantly, engaging in seemingly hopeless battles against enemies from higher dimensions and greater power. There's an endless amount of work for the Empire's Iron Knight. There's no time to dwell on lost love. .. At the same time, Artorius's airplane came to a steady stop on the tarmac of Tokyo International Airport. As he stepped down from it, he looked around and couldn't help but marvel. After all, it was an international metropolis, with futuristic skyscrapers soaring hundreds of meters high, three-dimensional overpasses in all directions, massive neon-lit billboards, and well-planned streets bustling with pedestrians. All of it brought a strong sense of excitement to the women who had never left the Einsborn castle since birth. "Ah ha ha ha! Ilya! Miss Ilya!" Just like any energetic child, Ilya, who had been drowsy on the plane just moments ago, now happily ran forward on the vast and spacious tarmac. Turning back to the worried Sella, she called out, "Come chase me, Sella," in a playful invitation. Due to various reasons, the maid's energy and stamina were significantly lower than Ilya's. Therefore, they could only rush behind her anxiously. Until Artorius intervened. With a snap of his fingers, Ilya looked back to find Sella had vanished. At the same time, her little head bumped into something. As the impact force threatened to make her fall backward, Artorius reached out and caught her, pulling her into his arms. "Be a good girl, Ilya. Don't trouble Sella, okay?" he gently advised her. The gentle and attractive big brother-like admonishment made Ilya blush and shyly lowered her head. "MHM." Ilya only replied softly and snuggled into Artorius's embrace, enjoying the warmth of her gentle big brother. "Ilya is a good girl. He he he." Amidst her cute laughter and the roar of the plane's engines, a middle-aged gentleman in a fiery red suit knelt before Artorius. "Your Highness," the man said and tugged slightly at the twin-tailed young girl standing next to him, prompting her to bow like him. "Tosaka Tokyomi, a mage hailing from the clock tower of the Mages Association, humbly presents his respects. Lord Tosaka." Artorius released his hold on Ilya and gently reached out to help him up. "During my time in Japan, I entrust myself to you. It is my honor." Tokyomi replied while bowing even lower. Author's note. The road of the Empire conquest was far from smooth sailing. For 1.5 millennia, the battles between the surface world and the reverse side seemed endless and would continue indefinitely. For the sake of humanity's future, those who participated in the war made many sacrifices. Agravain was among them. This Holy Grail war was merely a brief break amidst the endless conflict. Chapter 124, The Tosaka. Lord Tosaka. Artorius released his hold on Ilya and gently reached out to help him up. During my time in Japan, I entrust myself to you. It is my honor. Tokiomi replied while bowing even lower. Humph. Though she was a little afraid, the cute little tsundere with a twin-tail hairstyle, when looked at by Artorius with curious eyes, let out a cute little snort, an act of rebellion against the royalty. Seeing her like this, Artorius didn't feel angry or offended. Because of her cuteness, this small issue could be completely forgiven. Who is this? This is... Tokiomi hurriedly explained, Rin, greet His Highness quickly. Nice to meet you, I'm Tosaka Rin. Although reluctantly, Rin still managed to offer a ladylike greeting to Artorius. Her actions made her even more charming. Rin. Artorius looked at her with interest. Nice to meet you. Consider this a welcoming gift. As he spoke, he handed her a small box. Rin instinctively wanted to refuse, but when she met Artorius's gaze, she couldn't bring herself to do it. When she opened the box, she found a sparkling red gem inside. Beautiful. Though she was still young, she was still a girl and naturally couldn't resist the allure of something so beautiful. I remember that the Tosaka family practices jewel mage craft, right? This should be useful for you. It's too valuable, Your Highness. Tokiomi attempted to intervene, feeling that the situation was becoming inappropriate, but Artorius waved his hand to dismiss the objection. The gift is for Miss Rin. Your family doesn't need to say anything more. Yes, Your Highness. T/N, looks like they're unaware that Artorius is the first emperor. All they know is that he's a royalty from the empire. Tokiomi sighed internally and didn't say anything further, his worry becoming more apparent on his face. At the same time, Rin's expression was torn. Despite being from a family skilled in jewel mage craft, she had never seen such a beautiful gem before. Moreover, she could sense the powerful magical energy emanating from it. With proper craftsmanship, such a gem could be turned into a potent mystic code. If she gave up on this opportunity. Do you really want to give this to me? Rin bit her lip, looking at Artorius, at times pushing the small box away and at times quickly pulling it back. Yes, of course. Artorius smiled and nodded. As I said, consider it a gift for you. As Artorius spoke, Rin's desire to accept the gift grew stronger. Then, I'll accept it. She mumbled, but just so you know, even if you give me so much, I won't sell Sakura to you. Ha ha ha. Hearing her words, Artorius first froze, then burst into a burst of hearty laughter, reaching out and gently patting her head. His action caught Rin off guard, making her instinctively feel like she said something embarrassing or did something awkward, but she wasn't sure what it was exactly. Regardless, she held her ground, gazing at Artorius with a defiant look. That. Her remark made Tokiomi even more uncomfortable and regretful of bringing his child here. Sakura? Is she your daughter, Lord Tosaka? Artorius asked, seemingly knowing the answer already. Yes, Your Highness. She went to the Empire to serve His Majesty the Emperor last month. Tokiomi confirmed. I see. Artorius nodded as he turned to Iri. The practice of the youth army still exists, then? Yes. Iri nodded. Though its content and form have changed somewhat, the tradition of sending the offspring of nobles and important figures to the Emperor remains significant in the Empire. I see. Artorius nodded in understanding. When he mentioned the youth army, he was referring to the practice during his time of conscripting noble offspring from the conquered Germanic tribes to serve as guards and hostages by his side. In his era, the youth army had become a common practice, and these noble children became an essential part of the Empire's military force. Upon hearing Iri's explanation that the system still existed, Artorius became slightly curious about how it had changed in modern times. Wait a moment. Hearing their conversation, Tokiomi couldn't help but pause. A frightening idea had come to his mind. The earlier news mentioned that a member of the imperial family had secretly gone to Japan. But now, hearing what His Highness said, and that he's with someone from the Einsburn, could it be he's actually? No, it can't be, right? Tokiomi was both startled and suspicious of this conjecture. Meanwhile, Artorius, looking at the young girl, said with a smile. Did you hear that, Rin? I didn't take away your sister. She is still a member of the Tosaka family, only she went to the Empire to receive an education. Isn't it the same thing? Though she said that, Rin continued to hold her ground. Artorius found her stubbornness cute. Meanwhile, Ilya, standing next to Artorius, pouted. She felt like she had a competitor. That kind of jewel she didn't get one even though she was right here. With that thought in mind, Ilya's resentment towards Rin increased. It's not the same. Artorius looked at Rin seriously and glanced at Ilya's pouting face. While contemplating how to compensate Ilya with a gift, he told Rin, it's a noble mission for the Empire and humanity, not just loyalty to me personally. Me? Rin appeared somewhat puzzled by his words. Also. Artorius continued, looking at the bewildered Rin, if you want to see your sister again, why not go to the Empire and study there too? But, listening to Artorius speak, Rin couldn't help but feel a flutter in her heart. But if she chose to go along with this, would she have to leave her home and her parents? Instinctively, she wanted to refuse, but it felt as though she would be admitting defeat if she did, so she kept her lips sealed, unsure of what to say. Don't know how to decide. Artorius smiled. Then take some time to think about it. We still have plenty of time, Rin. Artorius looked up and turned to Tokiomi. Isn't that right, Lord Tosaka? That, my daughter. Tokiomi opened his mouth but wasn't sure how to answer. On the surface, the Empire's youth army system might have become more of a cultural tradition or a prettier term for overseas education with the establishment of a constitutional monarchy. However, on the inside, it still existed and was even greatly reinforced. Major Bayzet, for example, came from the Empire's youth army system and had received training from a young age. But she wasn't from a vassal state, she was one of the Empire's own, a family with an ancient bloodline dating back to the ancient Celtic era, the famous Red Branch Knights of Ireland. They were known as the Old Celts, specifically referring to those noble bloodlines that had persisted from the Empire's founding to the present day. As the world entered modern times, while steam engines became prevalent in the surface world, the Empire also eagerly extended its influence eastward. Noble children from Southeast Asia, India, and Japan joined the Empire's ranks. The reason the Empire didn't act earlier was simply to maintain the order of history and keep its world within proper human history, buying more time for humanity's freedom and ascension. They easily defeated the still isolated Japan at that time and made it their vassal state. Due to the convert effect, the noble youth who joined the Empire from these regions were often more enthusiastic. However, they were somewhat looked down upon since they joined relatively late. The Empire wasn't entirely ruthless, it didn't plunder everything. As a result, noble families with a single child would have their children returned to the family after reaching adulthood. Meanwhile, families with multiple children could choose to send some children away while keeping others within the family. Tokiomi chose the latter option. He sent Sakura to the Empire, while Rin stayed in Japan to inherit the family's legacy. Both paths held promising futures. That was Tokiomi's initial plan. However, now this peculiar prince had an odd request to lure his other daughter to the Empire as well, and that was a bit. Tokiomi had met those who received the Empire's education and later returned to Japan. One such person was Rudolf Zalgen, who had a half-Japanese heritage and supposedly spent his childhood in Japan. At the age of 6, he was sent to the Imperial Academy for education and later returned to become an influential figure in the world of magecraft in Japan, courtesy of the Empire. Tokiomi didn't interact with him much, but he had a lasting impression of the man. Last month, that white-haired individual, who looked prematurely aged, came as an envoy of the Empire to his home, inviting Sakura. Despite being in the late 20th century, the man was dressed in black armor, complete with medieval-style chainmail and a helmet, carrying a sword. He spoke fervently about the Empire, idolizing the Emperor and proclaiming that Sakura's education in the Empire would be the best choice. It was as if he was stuck in some sort of fantasy delusion, in short, a Chiyunibu. Even though another Empire's envoy assured him that Rudolf was an exception, it was something his father could also vouch for. Tokiomi's father also had received an education in the Empire and didn't succumb to such a delusion, even bringing back a wife, which was his mother and Rin's grandmother, but still, wasn't there still a possibility? There was still a possibility that his own child would become an Empire fanatic with delusions of magnificence. If possible, he really didn't want that to happen. Choosing Sakura over Rin had something to do with this consideration as well. Compared to the outgoing Rin, Sakura's reserved personality made it less likely for her to be influenced and become a fervent fanatic. However, could he really reject a request from an imperial prince? Even if the prince said you don't have to decide now, it's entirely up to Rin. Could he truly rest easy with that? Tokiomi was worried about this. Author's note. Rudolf Zalgen, also known as Matokuria in the original, was a member of the Zalgen family, a prominent European mage family associated with the mystery. For those unfamiliar, the Matu family originally hailed from Russia, where they were known as the Zalgen family. In this timeline, they naturally aligned themselves with the empire. Even after relocating to Japan, they retained their original family name and remained devoted subjects of the empire. Chapter 125, Unsuited for a Peaceful Life. Despite his inner worries, Tokiomi maintained the elegance of a nobleman on the surface. He couldn't help but make a sarcastic remark in his mind, why are there so many people? Did the Einsborn family decide to go on a joint trip? But on the surface, he remained silent. Why are there so many people? His daughter, Rin, complained next to him. Though she helped him vent his frustration. Next, Tokiomi started to worry about how he would accommodate all these people in his place. Apart from that, there were food expenses and various other issues they brought along. Of course, he kept it all to himself. In that case, there won't be enough space in my house. Rin continued to assist him. Tokiomi looked at his daughter with a somewhat worried expression. He wasn't sure if she was being considerate or causing trouble. In any case, his emotions were complex. On the other hand, Artorius was all smiles and seemed delighted. This made Ilya and even X feel a bit jealous. Well, it's only natural for Ilya to feel competitive with Rin, who is almost her age. But X? But then again, X's mental age. Initially, Tokiomi wanted to arrange accommodations for Artorius and his group at his own place, but no matter how big his house was, it couldn't possibly accommodate a goddamn 500 people. Don't worry about that. Iri gently said, we'll tour Tokyo first, and then head to Fuyuki. We already booked a hotel. Is that so? Tokiomi breathed a sigh of relief but still hesitated. He wanted to curry favor with Artorius, after all, considering himself a nobleman with deep-rooted beliefs in the hierarchy system. Treating a prince with respect was only natural. We'll visit once we're in Fuyuki. Artorius said casually, and also, thank you for your hospitality during our stay in Tokyo. Yes, it's my honor. Tokiomi let out another sigh of relief and bowed to Artorius again. Over the next few days, the head of the Tosaka family acted like an ordinary tour guide, taking Artorius and his group to various places for sightseeing and fun. From Tokyo Tower to Ueno Park, from Sensoji Temple to Ginza, and even Disneyland and Roppongi's business district. Though it was a bit crowded and noisy, the Einsborn family thoroughly enjoyed the charm of the metropolis. It was their first time going out and experiencing the attractions of a cosmopolitan city. As a result, their loyalty and affection towards Artorius grew stronger. This was especially true for Ilya. While the loyalty of other women towards Artorius was already full from the start, this included Iri as well. Pitifully, on the third day of the trip, a certain son-in-law couldn't stand the relaxed atmosphere anymore and left the group. No one knew where he went, causing some unease for Iri. However, she didn't show any of this unease during the time spent on the Ferris wheel with Ilya and Artorius. But as everything ended and night fell, on their way back to the hotel, a worried expression finally surfaced on Iri's face. Artorius noticed this. Under the cover of the night, other Einsborn maids, who had spent the day chattering happily, seemed to have a great time. Despite hundreds of beautiful women dressed uniformly as maids with identical hair and eye colors roaming together, they were entirely ignored by passers-by, demonstrating the usefulness of magecraft. The surrounding maids didn't intervene in the conversation between Artorius and Iri. Ilya, who was asleep in his arms, didn't either. On the other side, Rin, who held hands with Artorius and kept yawning adorably, didn't pay attention to these matters. Though she had been hostile towards Artorius at first, after only a few days, Rin had fallen into the habit of acting alt tsundere and seeking his attention. She seemed to be in a constant struggle with Ilya over this. Some people are just unsuited for a peaceful life, hey. Artorius said, even though peace is so good and precious, that guy can't adapt to it. Yes, but people like him don't have qualifications to say for justice. Artorius interrupted Iri before she could speak on Kiritsugu's behalf. I say this not because he's filled with sin and karma, nor because he lacks strength. It's because of his heart and nature. Artorius looked at Iri seriously. It's ironic really, just as this, just as that, yet his understanding of it is so shallow and delusional. Iri opened her mouth, instinctively wanting to say something, but in the end, she remained silent. Ultimately, despite her outward appearance as a dignified and virtuous lady, Iris Veal von Einsborn was still a simple little girl at heart. She was only a year older than Ilya. Even with Einsborn's magical devices capable of rapidly infusing knowledge, skills, and even personalities, could Iri be considered a proper adult? Relax and enjoy yourself, Iri. Artorius said to her with ease, for us, there aren't many moments of leisure like this. Big brother Artorius. Following Artorius's advice, Ilya, who was cuddled in his arms, whispered his name with perfect timing while revealing a lovely smile. Children are truly wonderful, innocent, lively, and very precious. Artorius said while kissing Ilya on the forehead, prompting a surprised from Rin as she playfully shook his arm, making him smile happily. I love children the most. T/N, AO. Artorius looked into Iri's eyes as he said this. Iri tilted her head slightly, showing a mix of shyness and loneliness. Just as mentioned earlier, she was still considered a child in terms of age. However, when it came to her body and status, things were quite different. At the same time, that emperor is no longer reliable. In Fuyaki City, within the grand mansion that resembled a castle, the Einsborn family's residence lacked air conditioning, running water, and almost any modern amenities. It was like a medieval fortress, sinister and cold. The guy previously discussed by Artorius and Iri was now busy organizing his armament. Firearms, ammunition, and various other types of weapons and equipment were spread around him. Beside him stood a short-haired, well-built woman calmly watching him. I have to fight in this Holy Grail war by myself in the end. Though the Holy Grail war was still half a year away from truly commencing, he had already decided to leave the Einsborn family and wait alone in Fuyaki City until the war began for real. Beside him, a woman who served as his assistant calmly observed him without uttering a word, perfectly fitting her role as a tool. What had Kiritsugu experienced during his time in the Einsborn family? What didn't align with his wishes? What went wrong? She didn't question or care about any of it, she simply stood there calmly. Hand it over. Silently obeying his command, she handed him the gun. It looked like an antique firearm. It was precisely the type of partner Kiritsugu favored, the killing tool that had accompanied him through countless battlefields, slaying numerous enemies. He gently caressed the barrel as if it were his lover. Compared to the dissolute and irresponsible emperor, he trusted the gun in his hand more. At the same time, Artorius and his group returned to the hotel they had rented. It was a hotel with hot springs, a very large one, capable of accommodating more than 500 Einsborn maids. Let's take a bath, soak in the hot springs. I want to have a drink. How about playing chess? I'd rather play with His Majesty. No way. Ilya is still clinging to His Majesty. During dinner, the maids became more familiar and friendly with each other, forming small groups and discussing their favorite topics: beautiful clothes, entertainment, delicious food, and, of course, their beloved ruler. Everyone has become livelier. Observing this scene, Iri's mood improved considerably, contrasting the oppressive atmosphere in the Einsborn castle. Here, everything was lively, cheerful, and sunny. The maids were not dressed uniformly like typical maids. Some wore yukatas from the hot spring hotel, while others donned casual home attire they had bought in the past 2 days. Although there were hints of magecraft to make regular people overlook these outfits, the maids' attires for going out remained relatively conservative. The outfits with sensual and lewd designs meant for the emperor were stowed away in their luggage, to be taken out and shown to him when the time came for each of them to serve him intimately. Yeah, isn't this great? Artorius responded, enjoying the maid's feeding service while being accompanied by Ilya. At the same time, X, who was busy eating and drinking, paused. Don't think too much about it, Iri. X, who had a very close relationship with Iri, cheerfully said, my son is strong. As long as we rely on Artorius, everything will be fine. Iri once again showed a gentle and saintly smile, like that of a goddess. But before she could say anything else, the maids pulled Artorius away. Your Majesty, come and join us. Eagerly, the maids rushed over, grabbing Artorius's hand and leading the emperor away. Let's all go to the hot springs together. Sure. Don't push, one at a time. Artorius quickly forgot what he wanted to say to Iri, happily laughing as he followed the maids to the hot springs. What's with that man? He's a pervert, a maid maniac. The left-behind Ilya grumbled discontentedly, speaking words she had recently learned but didn't fully understand herself. I can do that kind of thing too. She added. Yeah. I can do that too. X chimed in from the side. Their words made Iri feel a headache coming on, so she put on a stern face and said to them, Ilya, where did you hear those words from? You shouldn't say those words anymore, understood? But. Understood. Ugh, understood. Exerting her maternal dignity, Iri found Ilya to be quite obedient. But as she looked at the little girl's dejected expression, she couldn't help feeling a bit sympathetic. Don't worry. X then said to Ilya, when you grow up a bit more, you can do that too, you know. Really? X. Don't teach Ilya strange things. Strange? Isn't this common sense? X tilted her head, posing a peculiar question. Clearly, there were many differences between her world's common sense and this world's. At the same time. Your Majesty. Your Majesty. Such birdsong-like whispers echoed one after another, leaving someone nearby, who was observing the hot springs through binoculars with gritted teeth, feeling like her principles were collapsing. So, this is the legendary Dragon Emperor. The greatest emperor in the history of the world. Wise, mighty, unmatched ruler without any flaws, a perfect and impeccable monarch. This. Damn it. He's just a pervert indulging in debauchery. The person expressing these complaints was not some voyeuristic pervert, it was Imperial Major Bazet, who received a mission from her direct superior, Agravain of the Iron Hand. A few days ago, she received a mission from her direct superior to monitor a royalty. At first, when she heard she had to ensure the royalty's every wish and happiness during his vacation, she flatly refused. The reason was simple: as an elite of the Empire, it was no problem to ensure his safety, but beyond that? Clearly outrageous and a violation. She wasn't some errand girl to run trivial tasks. They should find someone else for the mission. She even protested, since when did the Imperial Army become errand guys for the royal brats? However, right after that, Agravain said something that shocked her. If it were any other member of the Imperial royalty, they wouldn't receive this treatment. But when it's the Dragon Emperor himself, His Majesty Artorius I, it's a different story.